My husband and mother-in-law treated me like a servant, mocking my efforts, demanding obedience, and making me feel invisible. Alex's words cut through the clatter of dishes like a keen scalpel. "Alara, bring me some tea now." I halted, my hands dipped in soapy water. "Hold on, I'm doing the dishes." "What?" His tone was incredulous and impatient. "Stop that and then bring me the tea right away. Can't you obey simple commands?" "But," I began, only to be interrupted. "What a useless wife you are." "Make me some sweet coffee," said another voice. Mrs. Whitmore, my mother-in-law, spoke from the living room. She sat there munching a slice of cake she had grabbed from the fridge, her eyes gleaming with malice. I sighed and looked at the stack of dishes. "There are so many. Leave them for later." "Just do what we say, useless wife," Alex's voice hissed, each syllable hurting. I was Alara, a 28-year-old working mother whose life felt more like a jail than a home. Married at 23, I had hoped for love and friendship, but instead found myself in the hands of Alex and his domineering mother. Our 4-year-old son was the only bright spot in an otherwise dark existence. We lived in Alex's parents' house, a decision foisted on me under the premise of caring for Mrs. Whitmore after my father-in-law died. Initially, I sympathized with her alleged anguish, but it quickly became evident that I was nothing more than a part in her cruel game of home oppression. Cooking, cleaning, and working just weren't enough. My attempts were treated with derision, and my meals were either left untouched or sharply ridiculed. "The stir-fry is so half-hearted," Mrs. Whitmore would remark. "Cook it properly from scratch." "I'm busy and can only do simple things," I'd say, trying to maintain a calm voice. "That's why I hate backtalk from my daughter-in-law," she quipped. "Cook from scratch? Why don't you cook? You are a good cook, correct?" I risked to react once and soon regretted it. "Why would I do housekeeping with you here?" She responded coldly and dismissively. "Are you out of your mind?" Their brutality grew with time, progressing from harsh words to a chilling quiet. They began to entirely disregard me, as if I were a ghost in my own home. My presence, which was previously underestimated, now appeared completely invisible. 5 years passed in this suffocating environment. Alex and I turned 35 and 33 respectively. Our son developed, but the unpleasant atmosphere in the house remained constant. My mother-in-law, now 63, appeared to thrive on my suffering. One evening, as I trudged home from work, a heavy revelation hit me. They saw my existence as meaningless. I was a shadow, unnoticed and unheard. The only voice that acknowledged me was my son's. The idea of losing even that minor recognition was agonizing. When I returned home, I started cooking right away, hoping to lift my spirits. I made mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry with bell peppers and pork, attempting to bring some regularity to our dinner. "Bring me the mayo," Alex said unexpectedly, breaking his long silence. "Sure, here you are," I said, handing him the mayonnaise. His first words to me in ages were not thanks or discussion, but rather a command. It was the last straw, the limit of my patience and tolerance. Mrs. Whitmore demanded, "Clean the toilet." "What? Now?" I was shocked. "Yes, now," she demanded, her voice full of hate. I snapped back, unable to suppress my annoyance. "Don't say such a thing while we're eating. It's nasty, just like your heart," she said. Our dispute immediately escalated, with Alex interjecting and demanding that I apologize to his mother. But I refused, standing firm for the first time in years. The conflict reached its climax, and a conclusion formed within me. I needed to get out of this toxic environment, not just for myself, but also for my baby. I returned to my room, my determination stiffening. I downloaded divorce papers, completed them, and slapped them in front of Alex. His amazement was evident, but I felt just icy determination. "I'm filing these," I announced, my voice firm. As I stood there, looking at my husband's puzzled expression, I realized I had finally stepped out of the shadows. It was time to regain my life. The days after I declared my divorce were a blur of frigid stares and stinging remarks, but in the midst of the chaos, I discovered an unexpected sense of freedom. Mrs. Whitmore looked at the food I was serving one evening with distaste. "You call this food? Even a child cooks better." I bit my tongue, concentrating on my son's happy expression. "Eat up, sweetheart. I made your favorite tonight," Alex added in, his voice full of sarcasm. "Oh, playing the perfect mother now, are we? What a joke." I could feel my rage rising, but I held my cool. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son." Mrs. Whitmore snorted. "Don't act high and mighty. You're just a burden in this house." The tension around the table was apparent. Alex's attempts to insult me grew more intense. "So, Alara, Have you thought about how you'll survive after the divorce? You can barely keep a house, let alone your own life. I stared him directly in the eyes. I have been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son. His smirk faded somewhat, and a spark of concern appeared on his face. Mrs. Whitmore was quick to intercede. Don't be absurd. You need us more than we need you. The talk drifted to finances, which they typically avoided. You do realize that without my salary, this household would crumble, I said to myself rather than to them. Mrs. Whitmore sneered. We'd manage. We don't need your pity money. But Alex's silence spoke volumes. He understood the truth. They would be in serious financial trouble if I did not provide a living. Their behavior deteriorated during the next few days. Mrs. Whitmore alternated between trying to sweet-talk me into staying and shouting insults when I refused. Alex, on the other hand, appeared confused, his arrogance eroding as the reality of his financial dependency became clear. One afternoon, I overheard a talk between them that chilled me to the core. She can't just leave us like this, Alex growled. We need her money. Mrs. Whitmore's response was chilly and calculating. Do not worry. I have a plan. We'll make her life so unpleasant that she won't want to leave. Hearing their genuine objectives exposed was a revelation. They did not care about me or our son. It was all about power and wealth. That night, as I lay in bed, an idea began to emerge in my head. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. But it would not be fought with words or trivial disputes. I'd strike them where it hurts the most, their pride and their pocketbook. The following morning, I began putting my plan into action. I contacted a lawyer, a bright, no-nonsense woman who was highly recommended. I want a divorce, and I want to make sure they don't get a penny more than they deserve, I informed the woman. She nodded, her eyes bright with determination. We'll make sure of it. You've been the only breadwinner, correct? We'll make use of that. My resolve got stronger with each passing day. I began documenting everything, insults, financial manipulation, and even little grievances. It was time to turn the tables. It was time to accept the repercussions of their deeds. As I prepared my case, I felt a sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, I felt like I had power over my own fate. The shades of scorn were slowly lifting, revealing a new dawn. As the divorce proceedings began, the mood in the house became more caustic. Yet, with each passing day, my panic faded, replaced by a steely resolve. Mrs. Whitmore decided to try a new strategy one evening. Alara, dear, why don't we forget all this nasty business? You know we're family. Her comments were insincere. I met her stare unwaveringly. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Alex, who had been silently watching, scoffed. Oh, playing the victim now? You're not as innocent as you pretend to be. I felt a wave of rage, but I kept my voice composed. I'm not playing anything, Alex. I'm just no longer willing to be your scapegoat. As is typically the case, the subject turned to finances. You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him? Alex was skeptical. I grinned with a tiny, confident curl of my lips. I've been supporting this family for years. I think I can manage. Mrs. Whitmore turned her gaze into a sneer. You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back. But their remarks no longer had force over me. I recognized my worth and knew the truth. The following day, I met with my lawyer again. She outlined the strategy clearly. We'll expose their financial dependency on you. It will play a crucial role in the custody battle and the division of assets. I nodded, feeling vindicated. The law was on my side, and I was prepared to fight back. At home, the tension had reached a boiling point. Mrs. Whitmore's attempts to discredit me got increasingly desperate. You think you're so smart, she sneered one evening. But you're just a cold-hearted woman abandoning your family. I stared her directly in the eyes. I'm a woman who's finally standing up for herself. Alex leaped in, his voice full of fury. You'll regret this? You can't survive without me. However, his threats fell on deaf ears. I was done being intimidated. As the days passed, my preparations for the court battle became more intense. I obtained financial accounts, documented their harsh remarks, and gathered evidence of their negligence. One afternoon, as I was arranging my documents, my kid approached me. Mom, are we going to be okay? His voice was soft and hesitant. I drew him into an embrace, feeling a flash of protectiveness. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place, and we're going to start a new, happy life, just you and me. His arms tightened around me, and I knew I'd made the correct decision. I was fighting not just for myself, but also for my son's future. The court hearing date approached, bringing with it the prospect of impending freedom. I was prepared to confront Alex and Mrs. Whitmore and put an end to their tyranny and emotional abuse. I was ready to take back my life and give my son the peace and happiness he deserved. It was time for justice, and I was determined to see it delivered. The court hearing day arrived, and I was filled with both dread and determination. I felt a sense of surrealism when I sat across from Alex and Mrs. Whitmore in court. This was the moment when everything changed. The proceedings started with frigid formality. Alex's lawyer portrayed him as a dedicated spouse and parent battling under unjust accusations. Mrs. Whitmore played the sorrowful mother-in-law who had been wronged by her ungrateful daughter-in-law. However, their performance was apparent, and their lies were flimsy. When my turn came, I spoke clearly and steadily. I've been the only provider for this family for years. My husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulative behavior have been continual sources of stress. Alex intervened, his voice tinged with feigned hurt. Alara, how can you say such things? I've always backed you. I turned to him, my stare steadfast. Alex, support is more than words. It's about deeds, and your actions have only demonstrated selfishness and harshness. The judge listened closely as I presented my evidence, which included financial accounts, audio recordings of their verbal abuse, and testimony from neighbors who witnessed their behavior. The fact was undeniable. As the evidence accumulated, Alex's facade began to collapse. Mrs. Whitmore's poise shattered, and her innocence slipped away. The courtroom was quiet, the air thick with anxiety. Then came the realization that sealed their doom. My lawyer submitted photos and documentation confirming Alex's adultery and Mrs. Whitmore's clandestine affair with Mr. Harwood, a wealthy neighbor. Murmurs broke out in the courtroom as the photographs of them in compromising postures were shown. Their lie was exposed for all to see. Alex's face became ashen, his eyes wide with surprise. Mrs. Whitmore's face twisted into rage, and her hands trembled. You compromised our privacy," she yelled, her voice shrill. I glanced at her, my voice steady yet forceful. I revealed the truth, which you both had been hiding for far too long. The court shouted for order, but the harm was already done. Their credibility was shattered, and their lies were revealed in the bright light of the courtroom. As the session concluded, the judge's conclusion was apparent. I was given full custody of our son, and a fair distribution of assets was ordered. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were left with just their destroyed reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. The years of deception and emotional assault had finally ended. I had confronted my oppressors and emerged victorious. But the finest moment was when my son raced into my arms outside the courthouse, his face beaming with relief and joy. "We did it, Mom," he exclaimed, his voice full of delight. "Yes, we did," I said, holding him close. "We're free now. This is only the beginning for us." As we walked away hand in hand, I realized this was more than simply a personal win. It was a victory for everybody who has ever been made to feel little, helpless, or unworthy. It represented a victory for truth and justice. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one full of optimism and the promise of a better future. The court verdict had an immediate and chaotic impact. The story of Alex and Mrs. Whitmore's deception spread like wildfire, ruining their reputations in our little neighborhood. They could no longer hide behind their facade of respectability. In the days following the verdict, I concentrated on rebuilding my life with my kid, but I couldn't deny the gratification of knowing Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were facing the repercussions of their decisions. One evening, as I was making dinner, I had an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Harwood, Mr. Harwood's wife, appeared, her eyes crimson from unshed tears. "Alara, I've heard about everything. I can't believe what Sylvia, Mrs. Whitmore, did," she exclaimed, her voice breaking. I invited her in and offered a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she expressed her sadness. I trusted her as a neighbor and friend. And to think she was having an affair with my husband. Her voice trembled, so I listened and offered words of comfort. Mrs. Whitmore's actions had clearly caused far more damage than she had planned. The next day, I saw Alex in town. He was a shell of his former self, his arrogance replaced with a defeated expression. "Alara, please, can we speak?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I paused, facing him. "What's there to talk about, Alex?" He fidgeted, unwilling to meet my gaze. I apologize for everything. I didn't understand how much I relied on you and your strength." His apologies, however late, reflected the shift in power. He had lost everything, his dignity, his home, and his family, and in that loss, he had finally admitted his own flaws. Mrs. Whitmore, however, received the greatest criticism. Her affair with Mr. Harwood had not only wrecked her reputation but also resulted in legal problems. Mrs. Harwood sought a divorce and sued her for alienation of affection. I learned of Mrs. Whitmore's dilemma from neighbors. Whispers and tales depicted a lady undone by her own acts. She had become an outsider, rejected by individuals she had previously considered friends. I saw her at the grocery store one day, hurrying through the aisles with downcast eyes. Our paths touched, and for a brief moment, our eyes met. The sight of hatred and defeat in her eyes was undeniable. "You did this to me," she said under her breath as she walked by. I watched Sylvia leave, her figure slowly fading as she hurried away, her eyes filled with resentment. I felt a strange mix of pity for her and vindication for myself. "No, Sylvia," I whispered under my breath. "You did this to yourself." The tides of justice had finally shifted. Everything they had done to me, all the lies, the manipulation, the emotional torment, had come full circle. The consequences of their actions were now irreversible. I could see them struggling, living in the aftermath of the deceit they had carefully cultivated over the years. Their false facade had shattered, and now they were forced to face the reality of what they had become. As I watched them suffer through the consequences of their own making, I felt a sense of calm satisfaction. But it wasn't just about them getting what they deserved. The real reward was in the freedom I had gained. The best form of retribution, I realized, was not in revenge, but in living a life full of peace and strength, free from the toxicity and harmful influence they had cast upon me for so long. My focus shifted back to what truly mattered, the future I was building with my son. We were free now, free from the prison they had trapped me in for all those years. I had broken free, and now, I was living the life I had always dreamed of. This wasn't just a story of revenge or victory, it was a story of liberation. It was a powerful testament to my strength and resilience. I had taken control of my destiny, broken the chains of abuse, and freed myself from the tyranny of their manipulation. As I looked ahead, I knew that the future was bright, and the best was yet to come. I was no longer a prisoner to their cruelty. I was free, and the world was mine to conquer. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I exposed my half-sister for cheating and revealed my father's infidelity, making him lose everything in the divorce as revenge. Edit. Hello. To anyone coming from those other subs, I will remove any comments on my posts that are harsh and intended to bully me. I've already received some, and I see my post has been shared in other areas. I know the sub since I was tagged by an automod. I didn't share my experience of being bullied or called a liar, so screw it. I never asked to be posted on subreddits dedicated to mocking others because you enjoy bullying others. Get a dang life. Here's a life lesson for you neckbeard idiots. Get away from the keyboard. Did the post get removed? It is all here now. So, I, 20 female, have a sister. I'm going to call her Freya, because why not? She's 22. She has cheated often since she began dating, creating an unending circle of infidelity. Her first romance occurred when she was 15, and I was 13. She introduced me to Brad. Sweetheart. Great guy. 2 days later, she spent a significant amount of time in her room with her study buddy. I was not foolish. I figured out what she was doing. Heck, she informed her friends. She boasted to them about it while sitting on our living room couch. As soon as she did it, I realized she wasn't a good person. She disgusted me. When she and her study partner returned to her room, I took a picture via the keyhole in her door. They were simply kissing, gross, but nothing worse. I waited. The next day, I took her phone and obtained Brad's number. I texted him, explaining who I was and why I was messaging him. He did not believe she was cheating. I texted him the picture and begged him not to tell her how he discovered it. He agreed. They broke up. Obviously. She was heartbroken and blamed her pals for telling him. She never suspected me. Why should she? I was the sister who clung to her, imitated what she wore, and observed everything she did. I admired her. I kept up the pretense. I didn't want her to know what I knew or had done. I hoped she learned her lesson. However, she didn't. The next true boyfriend arrived when she was 17 and I was 15. I'd been watching her like a hawk, waiting for the next boyfriend. Nobody would date her for a while after Brad. She was a cheater after all. Even her study companion didn't want to date her because he already had a girlfriend. That condition did not continue longer than a month. After Brad broke up with Freya, someone informed his study partner's girlfriend that he was a cheater. Weird. Anyway, let's introduce Steven. Trusting, maybe a little dim. He saw the best in everyone. She convinced him that she and Brad had only ever kissed, Nothing else. I didn't believe it, but whatever. This naive church lad believed she had transformed after only 2 years. Okay. Sure. After a month, I still had no dirt. I started to wonder if she had changed. Bam! She boasted to her buddies about cheating on Steven. I remained hidden. I needed the specifics. I wish I had documented the confession, but I did not. What I did hear was that she was going to meet her side piece at the park the next afternoon. We were both old enough to leave the house whenever we wanted. All we had to do was tell our mother where we were going. The next day, she stated that she was heading to the mall. I stated that I was hanging out with buddies. I waited till she was a few minutes ahead of me before going to the park. I took images of them hugging under a tree. Kissing. Rinse, repeat. Steven pledged to keep the information secret. He handed her the photos, but this time there was no proof of who took them. She would have caught me if I had taken them up close, but those images could have been shot anywhere. They were in the midst of a park. Relationship number 3. Enter the bad dude. I despised him. He was rude, disgusting, and disrespectful. This one was tricky. He was obviously on the rebound, only a few weeks after Steven, but I got a nasty feeling. I suspected he would be the type to hurt her if she cheated on him. I had to persuade her to end the relationship or have him leave her without blaming her. Even if she was terrible, I needed to plan carefully. I waited for evidence. Do you believe it? They were cheating on each other, with the same guy. I felt calling them out would merely transform them into a throuple. I was mistaken. Bad lad despised the thought of someone knowing he was gay. When he discovered that Freya knew he was bisexual, he fled so quickly that his tires caught fire. 3 down. My sister still didn't know who was exposing her, but she was becoming suspicious. She was ranting about me without realizing it, so I knew. Then she told me her strategy. She planned to tell each of her friends a different narrative and see which one her next boyfriend would get. I helped her make up phony names, descriptions, and locations. It was honestly quite enjoyable. Boyfriend number 4 was not a boyfriend, but rather a guy acquaintance of hers who was involved in the conspiracy. He wanted Freya so desperately that he would do everything to get her attention. She informed friend A she was cheating on 4 with a blonde guy and would see him at the ice cream shop tomorrow. Friend B has brown hair, beach. Friend C has red hair, house. Friend D got bald, Starbucks. Freya wanted me to check out the ice cream shop. Freya stayed at home, while 4 went to Starbucks. No one was on the beach. She reasoned that if none of us observed anything at the sites, then friend B was responsible. We did exactly that. It was hilarious to receive her continuous texts wondering whether anyone had seen someone. She was in a panic. Buddy B had been her best buddy since she was in diapers, and she did not want it to be them. In the end, nobody came up. She yelled at B in a text, accusing them of being a poor friend and alerting her ex-partners about her adultery. B disputed this heavily. But their friendship was in ruins. I supported B, claiming Freya was insane for suspecting them. Friend C supported Freya, saying it was suspicious that A, C and D did not show up at their assigned locations, and reasoning led to B. D felt they were all mad and even blamed me, claiming that if I was the snitch, why would all of the pals have turned up anywhere? They were unable to prove anything because no one was present on the beach. Freya felt offended. She said she would never hurt me, that she loved me too much to do so. We were sisters after all. In the end, D supported A and B because they believed Freya was insane. C remained with Freya. 4 and Freya never became a pair. Freya began dating Freya after believing the rat had disappeared. Poor, sweet Freya. His was the most terrible story since she cheated on him with his twin brother. This occurred when she was 20 and I was 18. Perhaps I was too old for this, but I wasn't finished yet. I was not going to let her ruin a nice guy's life. It took me longer to figure out this one. Twin brothers never question photos on Snapchat. Never question the guy's appearance. Why should they? They were twins. Then Freya shaved his head for a cancer-stricken buddy. His twin didn't? That is how I caught her? I obtained a video of them kissing in his car. Send it to Freya. I wiped my hands clean. He showed her the footage, and she freaked out. She had not informed anyone about the infidelity this time. Not me. Not C. Not 4. And since they were twins, she assumed no one would notice. Finally, she dated 4, the only guy remaining in our small town who was foolish enough to take her seriously. Of course, she did what she always did. She cheated. Here's the problem, I wasn't sure he'd break up with her over it, or if he'd believe it at all. So I waited. Collected evidence. In an unexpected twist of events, I discovered C and 4 cheating. They cheated on her. I submitted 4 images of Freya cheating. I emailed Freya photos of 4 cheating. It burst. She had no pals. Not one. She'd pushed them all away. And now, everyone in our small town knew she was a cheater. You might be asking why I'm telling this story right now. Why are you destroying my sister like this? I detest her. I've loathed her since I was a child. See, we're only half-sisters. Same father, different mothers? Our father cheated on her mom with my mother. My mother, whom I loved, was crippled. And my father had a superior attorney. When I was 5 years old, he abducted me from her. Legally, I assume. But my mother was only permitted visitation, nothing else. I have to see her once a week, for 1 hour. She was not considered safe to have children. When I got older, I would sneak over to her house after school to spend more time with her. My beloved older sister caught me and informed our father. We returned to court. And as a foolish 8-year-old, I told a judge that I despised my father. That he cheated? That guy was filth. That I wished he didn't know me. It was determined that my mother was isolating me from my father. And my visitation was restricted. I was sent to therapy to fix my feelings toward my father. Now, yes, I understand. She was just 10. But she never apologized. Even when I brought it up years later, she found nothing wrong with her actions. My mother died a year later. My father forbade me from attending her burial. My maternal grandparents attempted to push his hand, went to court. But they were shut down. They were instructed that unless they had proof that my father was a bad dad, they should not waste time. My father's wife forgave him. Not too bright in my opinion. She reared me with him. And I had my sister, who I despised. I pretended not to. Because the best retribution is best served cold. So, why tell this story now? Because my adorable half-sister uses this subreddit. I don't believe she has ever posted, but she lurks. And I'm moving out. I am going to live with my maternal grandparents. Why now, at 20, rather than at 18? Because today, the final nail in my revenge was driven into the coffin. I left photos all throughout the house. Photos of my father cheating on my stepmother, with several women. All are date-stamped, dating back to when they took me in approximately a week ago. Walmart's photo print service was quite helpful. I only want to destroy my father, and my sister. My stepmother, whom I honestly feel awful for, has a prenuptial agreement. If he cheats on her, he will receive nothing. She owns the home. The autos. The summer house. They have a shared bank account, which he may drain. However, to my understanding, the majority of her money is in a separate account. She's super rich. She was wealthy enough to pay for whatever I needed as a child, and she smiled the entire while. I'm not sure if she ever resented me. But she never revealed it. She treated me exactly like my sister. In addition, I left documentation that my sister was aware of our father's infidelity. Proof that my darling sister knew her mother was being cheated on but said nothing. Chat logs. Vocal recordings. Even physical invoices for presents he purchased to keep her quiet. It is all there. Waiting inside the home. Today, both my sister and father are away for the weekend. My stepmother will arrive home in a few hours. And I'll be gone. Even if Freya sees this 10 seconds after I hit post, she won't be able to clean up the mess in time. Okay, I see a lot of questions concerning the keyhole. To explain, my house is really old. Built by the residents of this town, back when dwellings were made by hand. You would just yell, "Help me build," and I'll buy the beer for the day. Unfortunately, they made several poor style decisions. Every bedroom door has a huge hole beneath the handle shaped like a keyhole. It was integrated into the metal plate connecting to the doorknob. The keyholes had no lock-like function. That house was so old that when we renovated it, we discovered knob and tube wiring. What about the insulation? Newspaper. Old bedsheets, Bible pages were torn, and more. There was also a frightening doll. Other unusual design decisions included what my sister dubbed a Coraline door. It once connected to a barn beside the house. But the barn had been gone for several years. And the real kicker? The basement light switch was in a restroom, not near the basement door. The bathroom light switch was located outside the bathroom. The cloth washer drain is linked to the shower, and when the washer is turned on, the shower bubbles up occasionally. To get rid of it, turn on the shower. In the basement, on the ceiling, there are several jar lids tacked to a piece of board because the previous owners used to nail the lids up and screw the jars in to retain nails, screws, and shattered glass. According to my father, the house is filthy, and strange things make little sense. There were other things I can't recall right now, But you assume the keyhole was more prevalent. It turns out it isn't, which surprises me. Edit. Many of you believe that a wealthy lady should live in a nice home. The house we lived in was purchased while she was pregnant with Freya. My father's grandparents and her great-grandfather were the builders, I believe, maybe not. All I know is that it was his family's home for years. He grew up there, but they lost it and had to relocate. He met and married my stepmother, and they stayed with her parents while searching for a home. He saw his old house for sale and begged my stepmother for it. She agreed on the proviso that they only hire labor when absolutely necessary, as her parents trained her to spend money wisely. They had Freya. He made minor repairs to one of the rooms, but no major renovations occurred at the time because they had a baby and were very busy. When they got me, the only repairs I knew about were that mine and Freya's rooms were cold. He opened the wall to inspect the insulation, which was old newspapers. The plan was for me and Freya to remain in their room while my stepmother and father slept on the couch until it was repaired. While doing this, he discovered the knob and tube wiring. We left the house while an expert repaired the wiring throughout the house. Then he finished insulating. When it comes to antique keyholes, my stepmother felt 3 were adorable. The bathroom was the only one that had been fixed. He removed the old-style handle, replaced it with a lockable one, pushed something into the hole, and plastered or painted over it, I'm not sure. We also tore up the 2 layers of carpet and removed the wallpaper from every room. While doing this in the living room, we discovered the Coraline door, as we named it. My father informed me that there used to be a barn immediately next to the home, and he assumed that was where it led. If you opened it now, you'd find nothing because the barn was gone. They hadn't just left an open hole in the wall, there were around 6 layers of wallpaper covering the door. These repairs and changes were always going on, all my father's work, because it was his paper and he understood what he was doing. I don't remember what happened when I was a kid. Also, you appear to believe that children aged 8 to 10 are stupid and incapable of holding grudges, which is absurd. I believe I mentioned that the revenge began at 13. Sure, the problem began at 8, but I had till 13 to stew and be outraged. No, I did not do this because a 10-year-old made an error. I did it because my sister never realized what she was doing was wrong. She told me I had a better family because of it, that my mother was a R, and that she did what was best and right. I despise her for never apologizing or acknowledging how much she damaged me. Edit. You want an update? I promise to give one, but things are hectic right now, so please wait. Question. Should I make a new post for the update or just add it here when I believe it's time? I keep seeing folks enter update me. How does this work? Question 2. Someone advised posting this in the Revenge subreddit. I do not want to copy and paste this. Does anyone who reads more than me know how to share the post or something in such subreddits so that more people may appreciate it? Question 3. I notice now that there has been a cross-post. Is that what I asked you about above? If so, how can I see where it has been cross-posted? I've been enjoying reading comments on Reddit and TikTok and don't want to miss out while waiting for things to settle down. Edit. Whoever dared to send Reddit care after me, sucks to be you. I'm already in therapy, and I learned a long time ago that you don't have to notify anyone until the act is completed. So it's too late for a therapist to try to quell the raging fire in your heart. Edit. I believe you will receive an update sometime today. I was going to update immediately, but I received a call from my therapist a few minutes ago, so I now have an appointment. Is it possible that this is because the video was shared on TikTok? Is there any dread in it? Or is this a coincidence? Update. I have wrecked my sister's relationships and friendships. Now I'm tearing apart her family. Am I pleased about it? Okay, hi everyone, you all requested an update. The original is growing too long, so I'm writing a second post on it. I'll start with my stepmother's reaction. Around the time she would have arrived home, I sat in front of my phone, waiting like a child on Christmas. To my disappointment, all I received was a text message. It said, tomorrow. Lunch, favorite pizza place. It didn't say the exact name, but you get the idea. That was all. I wondered whether she was going to take my life. After some discussion with my companions, I left. Dumb? Possibly. Am I still alive? You could say that. So I met my stepmother at my favorite pizza shop. We ordered, and she smiled at me. It was sort of creepy. She inquired if I understood why she had invited me out. My response was obviously idiotic, but I said, to murder me? She laughed, shook her head, and told me she had spent too much time keeping my dumb buttocks alive to kill me now. She said she invited me since she no longer has a need to keep my father's secrets from me. I, the theatrical dung beetle, asked for information. She provided. I still do not like her, but damn. She inquired whether I knew how my parents met. Obviously, I said no. She said that her cousin, Annie, was hosting a party for her friends and family. Adrian was acquainted with my mom, but she had never met my stepmother or father. My mother was born blind but enjoyed parties anyhow. There was alcohol there, but my mother simply drank pop in a glass with ice. My mother departed early because she didn't want to be away from Freya for too long, while my father stayed. Adrian presented my father and mother. Adrian had no reason to believe anything would occur. Adrian had already become intoxicated. Adrian, according to my stepmother, is unaware of what transpired next. She wasn't sure if my father had brought my mother a fresh cup with something other than pop, if he had dropped something in her drink, or if she had taken the wrong cup. Adrian glanced over and noticed my mother wobbling. In Sam's drunken view, my mother was plainly inebriated. There were a lot of cups on the table, so Adrian imagined Mom had grabbed the wrong cup too often. She brought my mother upstairs to sleep it off. That was the last time she saw my mother that night, though she did see my father a few times. Adrian continued to hang out with my mother, and one day, she revealed that she was pregnant. At the time, my mother was single. Adrian did some mental math and blew out, asking my mother a lot of questions, but my mother laughed it off, claiming she became pregnant after a one-night stand, not at the party. Adrian agreed hesitantly. Adrian cared for both me and Freya when I was born. Her red flags went up again when she saw us side by side, so she took a DNA test, one with me and one with Adrian, figuring that if it was a family member, we would be a slight match. We were not a good match, and she was relieved. Adrian babysat for us again when I was 3 and Freya was 5. According to my stepmother, Adrian couldn't stop staring at us and conducted another test on me and Freya. She received the results, and her heart fell. Freya and I were a match. She remained silent for a while, periodically asking my mother questions, but she couldn't keep it a secret and eventually told my stepmother. My stepmother exploded at my father. He said he was inebriated and confused my mother for her. He claimed there was consent, but it was a mistake that occurred only once. My stepmother agreed to forgive him on the condition that he be a part of my life. She expected him to concede that my mother would not want to be near him, but he and my mother settled in court. My stepmother expressed her dissatisfaction with this, but she accepted it. When I became increasingly alienated from my father, she handed him money for family therapy and playdates. He used this money, plus his own, to hire a lawyer and essentially take me. She couldn't stop him once she knew what he had done. She continued to have little to no interest in me and refused to become involved. My mother died, and she understood something. If she left him now, she would be leaving me with an imbecile who would most likely sell me for a pair of shoes. If she left, she could take Freya, but she had no claim to me, and I never allowed her to adopt me. That was not helping. She attempted to assist my grandparents in fighting for me, but they were silenced. She decided she'd put up with him to protect me. Her words. I don't know if this is real. She claimed she didn't care now that I knew the truth. She was divorcing him and wouldn't have to think about him anymore. I asked her about Freya, and she shrugged, saying her daughter resembles her father too much for her liking. She planned to give Freya a couple options for addressing the issues she observed in her, such as therapy or cutting off contact with her father. But she was going to steal everything from my father, because the prenuptial agreement they signed stated that the cheater gets nothing but the clothing on their back. This is just what I wanted. We left it there. She held me and apologized for not being better, for making so many mistakes, and for making me dislike both her and Freya. She said that if I needed anything, I should let her know. I'm starting to believe I misjudged her. I don't know yet though. We parted ways, and I returned home. I waited and waited before getting a call from my dad. I did not respond. He texted me, stating I was a terrible daughter, that he wanted me out of his house, LOL, and that he never wanted to see me again. He said I destroyed his marriage for a deceased lady he barely knew. He was furious about it, but I texted him back and told him that he had years to stop cheating on my stepmother and not let me catch him. He could have lived the picture-perfect life he believed he deserved. On my mother's behalf, I also used some strong language toward him. Next up came Freya. She did, in fact, locate the post. And did they apologize? Not. She texted me paragraph after paragraph, calling me a manipulative boonies and claiming I spent my life lying to her face about a mistake she made when she was 10. That she did not have to apologize or feel awful. That I should have enjoyed being a member of a new rich family. That I did not need to notify her mother about her father's bribery or her dishonesty. During the discussion, I told my stepmother that it was my fault that she gave Freya the ultimatum to go to therapy, break off contact with Dad, or find another place to live. I merely replied with a laughing emoji and blocked both her and my father. That was all yesterday. It doesn't end there. As some of you know, my therapist phoned me this morning. He inquired whether I had time to meet today. I did, and so I met with him. When I stepped in, he turned his laptop towards me and showed me a TikTok video about me. He questioned, "Is this you?" I couldn't stop laughing. He only shook his head, saying he had a lot more work to do than he expected, but he was smiling. I noticed the smile. He just didn't want to tell me that he felt my retribution was fantastic. I know it. We talked briefly about the problem and how far it was. I disagree, but whatever. I left. Later, my stepmother called and begged for assistance with something. I went to her residence out of curiosity. She told me that her lawyer recommended her to allow Dad time yesterday to come get his belongings and leave. He gathered what he could, and today we were going to make a campfire. I questioned if this was lawyer approved, and she shrugged, stating it was her property regardless. Dad didn't buy any of it and probably couldn't afford a lawyer to fight her. So we tossed a lot of stuff in a mound and let it burn. It was kind of fun. She summoned Auntie Adrienne over, who cried and held me because she felt guilty about not telling me. But she despised my father and refused to be near him. I showed my stepmother the text from Freya, and she called Freya, telling her she had only herself to blame. She told her not to blame me since she couldn't stop chasing nice guys away. If she wanted to stay with a wonderful guy, she should stop acting like her unfaithful mess of a father. She informed Freya she had a week to make her decision. She's an adult, and my stepmother can leave her whenever she wants. Then she hung up. My stepmother, Auntie Sam, and I ordered pizza. My stepmother's father called to find out what was going on and why Freya had shown up at their house crying. My stepmother went inside. I'm not sure what she said, but she walked out looking smug and told me not to worry about Freya because he was no longer my concern. I brushed it off and replied, "Whatever. Anyway, the day isn't finished yet, but I've blocked Freya and Dad." My maternal grandparents have confirmed that after my mother died, my stepmother was ready to slip them money to hire a lawyer and fight for me. I confronted her about not assisting them when Mom was alive, but she maintains that she was unaware my father was bringing them to court the second time until it was too late. She also expressed reluctance to contact my mother after assisting in the kidnapping. My stepmother's parents have also advised me not to worry about my father and Luca. If they do anything further after this, they will wish they had licked their wounds and moved on. I'm not sure what my stepmother's parents told Luca, but they appear to be strongly opposed to cheating of any type and believe Freya should do as my stepmother advised. Cut off Dad, seek therapy, and apologize to me. That, I believe, concludes things. It was chaotic for a while, but I'm getting on with my life, washing my hands of Freya and Dad. My stepmother said she entirely understands if I don't want anything to do with her. She said she made a lot of mistakes when I was younger, but she still wants to help me with expenditures and other things. In any case, everyone in my small town is aware of what they have done. Some individuals in my town, not just my therapist, discovered the post, and drama travels quickly. Apparently, I also own it. When people ask me about it, I tell them because I want them to understand what they did to me. I don't believe my stepmother is facing much blowback. She delivered all of the images I printed off to her lawyer, who laughed at the pile and claimed that my mere existence was enough proof for the divorce, but the pile didn't matter. Especially since I wrote dates on many of the photos, some of which were extremely recent. I don't believe this is as nice as the previous post because I never expected to make an update. I kind of just wrote it as it happened. I hope this calms down the drama fans in the comments. If anything more happens, I will probably post it here. There will not be any further updates. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I went into labor on my sister-in-law's wedding day, but my mother-in-law locked me in a bathroom to keep me from stealing attention. A few hours later, I awoke in the hospital, and my mother-in-law begged me not to file charges. But, oh boy, her face became pale when my spouse said this. My husband, Rick, 30, and I, 29, were blessed with a daughter 2 weeks ago. This is our first child, and we're understandably thrilled. We've been quite busy, and we're still adjusting to being parents. It's a difficult change for both of us, but we're doing our best. We don't have much support because of what happened on the day our daughter May was born. It was one of the most horrible experiences I've ever had, and I doubt I'll ever forget it. Even the joy of May's arrival is insufficient to help me overcome the paralyzing terror I felt that day. I believe I would have died if not for my husband's immediate assistance. Despite the sad tragedy, I believe that because it involves family, we should be a little kinder to them because May is the first kid in the family. But I'm unsure, and my judgment is muddled by all these hormones and infant obligations, which is why I've turned to Reddit for assistance. Please bear with me while I tell this lengthy and multi-character story. Rick has two younger sisters, Anna and Emily. Anna is 28, while Emily is 24. I have a pretty excellent relationship with both of them, and I don't believe there's any hostility between us. We aren't close because we're all busy with our careers and don't get together very often. Emily doesn't even reside in the same city as us, but we try to catch up and stay in touch through messages or phone conversations. Rachel, Rick's 53-year-old mother-in-law, is another significant figure in Rick's family in this story. While I get along well with Anna and Emily, Rachel is a completely different story. We don't always agree, and I believe she has issues with everyone, not just me. She's the biggest control freak you can imagine, and she won't stop. She wants things to proceed according to her wishes and desires. Her 3 children often accept her requests because she reared them after their father abandoned them. So they strive to make things simpler for both her and themselves. Furthermore, if someone dares to demand anything other than what she wants, she reacts, which can range from disapproval and moping to a full-fledged meltdown complete with tears and tantrums. Dealing with her is challenging, so I try to avoid her whenever possible. Rick gets this. He understands that his mother is troublesome, so he lets me keep my distance and deal with her as I see fit. On my end, I understand his feelings for her despite her domineering nature, so I let it go. She doesn't like me, therefore she doesn't interfere with my life, which works well for all of us. However, things spiraled out of control a few days ago, owing entirely to her actions. Now, I don't believe anyone will ever forgive her. Anna was getting married on May's birth date. It was a gorgeous ceremony, and her husband Jonah, 30, is Rick's acquaintance. He proposed to her about a year ago, and Anna asked me to be her bridesmaid. I had accepted. However, when Rick and I discovered I was pregnant, I had to suggest that she ask someone else because I knew I wouldn't be able to handle it. This was about 6 months after the proposal, therefore only 6 months till the wedding. I was 3 months pregnant by then. I expected repercussions from her for backing out midway, but I knew I needed to prioritize. I was very worried and jittery before telling her. I believed our connection would be strained indefinitely. However, to my relief and astonishment, none of it occurred. Anna was pleased when I informed her. She had forgotten about her wedding for a long time. When I told her I wouldn't be available for duty, she said, "Obviously, I'll be taking care of you." She even pondered rescheduling the wedding since she didn't want me to miss it, as I would have if May had been born then. That didn't happen for a variety of reasons, and she probably shouldn't have done it in the first place. It was a close call in the end, but she remained supportive throughout. Emily became the maid of honor, and I knew the 2 sisters were preoccupied with wedding preparations, so I didn't trouble them much during the pregnancy, which was traumatic for me. Nonetheless, they kept in touch as often as possible and came over to encourage me greatly. I feel a little guilty for not supporting Anna on the most important day of her life, despite the fact that she supported me the entire time. My mother-in-law was the only one who was upset about the situation. I believe Mom was angry that I couldn't be the maid of honor anymore, which caused some disturbance in the wedding preparations. That seemed like the only reasonable explanation, and I understood where she was coming from. However, the antagonism, for lack of a better phrase, persisted even after Anna accepted the pregnancy and my absence as maid of honor. The bride was not upset in the least, but Rachel began antagonizing me from that moment forward. It was strange, but I assumed I was on edge because of the hormones, and she was on edge because of the wedding. I assumed that all of this was simply building false narratives in my head. I ignored her as much as I could, and things were largely all right. During the wedding, things became out of hand, both physically and figuratively. I was completely pregnant, my feet were swollen, my abdomen was massive, and I felt like I was about to pass out. I still wanted to go to the wedding because Anna wanted me there. I had asked her previously whether she wanted me there because I wanted it to be her special day. I informed her that the presence of a heavily pregnant woman might draw attention away from her, something I didn't want. Weddings are for the bride and groom, and I would hate to be the one to take away from that. When I told Anna this, she was outraged and upset. She stated she couldn't believe I'd be preoccupied with such trivial matters and miss her wedding. She said she didn't care about the attention or the limelight. All she wanted was her family to be there for her on her wedding day. She told me I needed to come and not worry about the drama. I knew she meant it. She's not one to mince words. If she didn't want me there, she would have said so right away. But she did, and she stated it emphatically. I felt it was my obligation to be there for her. Despite my physical discomfort, I felt I needed to be present for her on her wedding day. I'm not going to lie, there were a lot of people whispering, but I tried to ignore them because I knew Anna was glad I was present. That was all that mattered to me at that moment. Rachel did not say much to me and glared at me the entire time. However, I was too uncomfortable to notice. I didn't have the energy to cope with her or understand her passive-aggressive conduct toward me, so I just let her be. She might glare all she wanted, I was not going to respond to her. Then came the big episode, which stunned and terrified everyone around me. I started feeling apprehensive just as the ceremony was about to commence. By then, I'd already met Anna. I got up and went upstairs, believing it would make me feel better and that I'd return when I did. Rachel had followed me without my knowledge. I went to the bathroom because I was sweating and feeling strange. Suddenly, my water burst. It was a literal flood, and I began to panic because, as much as I adore my daughter, she had picked the worst possible time to arrive. I couldn't think clearly. Thankfully, I noticed my mother-in-law in front of me. By then, I was crouching in agony. She raced to me, and I ordered her to take my phone and call Rick right away because we needed to hurry to the hospital. She helped me up and had me sit in the restroom. I gave her my cell phone. That is when she flipped. She claimed she'd make sure Rick arrived in an hour after the ceremony was complete since she didn't want me to take Anna's attention. I asked her if she was crazy and told her I couldn't take this for an hour. I tried to grab my phone from her, but she locked me inside and took it with her. So there I was, pregnant, with my child actually on the way, sitting on a toilet in a bathroom, without a phone or a spouse. I'm not sure how I didn't suffer a full-blown panic attack. Thank goodness I didn't, since I'm not sure what would have occurred otherwise. I stood up and slowly made my way to the door. I began beating on it. I yelled repeatedly. But no one heard me because the restrooms were on the first floor and everyone had already taken their seats for the ceremony. I screamed till my voice faded, but no one came. That was when I truly believed I was going to die, and take my baby with me. I was weary, wet, sweating profusely, and unable to speak. That was the last thing I remembered. I'm not sure what happened afterward. I passed out from tiredness. I can't recall how I got to the hospital. I know I did. A few hours later, I awoke in the hospital, sobbing with Rick by my side. It took me a few moments to figure out where I was and what was going on. When I noticed Rick crying, I expected the worst. Everything came flooding back, my mother-in-law locking me in the bathroom, my crying. And I believed May hadn't made it. When Rick saw I was awake, he breathed a sigh of relief and began crying in my arms. I had no idea what to make of it and felt a terrible feeling in my stomach. Then I saw the nurse enter with a baby girl, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I really wanted to hit Rick for messing with me like that. But he said he wasn't toying with me. He was just glad I was okay because I was unconscious when he found me in the restroom. I held my baby for the first time, and I don't think I'll ever forget the feeling. I don't think there is a better emotion in life. Nothing will ever compare to what I felt in those moments. Rick didn't offer me any specifics at the time, which I appreciate because I didn't have the energy to cope with it. I could hear a commotion outside and asked him what was going on. He stated his mother-in-law was outside and wanted to come in to see her grandchild. I described what had transpired in full. I told him what she had done, and how she had put our daughter in jeopardy for no reason. I also told him that I would never let her near my daughter. To me, she was dead. He said he knew everything. When he found me in that state, she broke down and told him everything. I told him that just because she broke down didn't mean I'd forgive her. He chuckled and stated his mother was dead to him from this moment forward, and he was going to file charges for endangering life. He stated that he would pursue legal action to ensure that she was punished for what she had done. When I heard him say that, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I know he adores his mommy. All three of them do. After the trick she pulled that may have cost me and my daughter our lives, I was in no mood to forgive her. If Rick had chosen her over me, our marriage would have ended. There would be no turning back, and somewhere deep down, I expected him to choose his mother. Despite everything, Mom worked extremely hard to raise them. Maybe I didn't expect him to defend me the way he did, but I'm not complaining. If anything, it has increased my affection for him, if that's possible. I questioned him about the wedding, and he claimed it went well. Emily and Anna were waiting for him to call so they could come visit us. When I inquired if Anna was furious, he laughed and said I didn't have to worry about her at all. She had been smiling with pride and delight, saying that her entire family had attended the wedding and that May's birth was the nicest gift she could have gotten. I had tears in my eyes when he told me that, and I told him to call them right away. Anna, Emily, and Jonah arrived at the hospital shortly after I did. The best part, Anna and Jonah were still dressed for their wedding. Anna refused to pass up the opportunity to snap a wedding photo with her niece. I started crying uncontrollably. It was a truly heartwarming moment. After taking the image, I apologized to Anna for destroying her day. She hugged me and told me I was misinterpreting the situation. I had made her day. I told her about my mother-in-law's actions after we announced the pregnancy. Anna stated that the only thing I did wrong was not informing them sooner. Perhaps they could have put an end to her turmoil. I told her I didn't want to cause trouble, and Emily responded that any amount of difficulty was fine as long as I was safe. Even as I type this, I have tears in my eyes because I realize they love me like family. They saw me as more than Rick's wife. I was a family member. Anna is one of the best women I know. She is so safe and happy. It's no surprise she is where she is today. I don't see how Rachel is so different from her children. It's as if they saw her and concluded that was not who they wanted to be. It's odd, but I don't mind. It was beautiful. Apparently, my mother-in-law was still outside. Anna had informed her on her way in that she would ensure Rick and I filed charges. My mother-in-law wanted to come in and see May, but I didn't want her anywhere near me. Anna stated we needed to protect ourselves from her. She apologized to me, saying she hadn't adequately addressed her mother's overprotective impulses or made it obvious that she had no objections to my pregnancy. She stated that if she had, perhaps the situation could have been avoided. I told her she had made me feel safe, and there was no way she was to blame. Rick was outside the entire time, conversing with my mother-in-law. When I was discharged and returned home with May a few days later, Rick informed me what he and my mother-in-law had discussed. He claimed he had informed her that he would be filing charges and that she could deal with it because nothing would change that. He also warned her she was never welcome in May's life. She was not her grandmother, in any way. She opted to endanger my and my unborn child's lives over a perceived slight that didn't even bother her. He also stated that the money he had been giving her, my mother-in-law was living off of Rick and Emily's money, would be significantly decreased. She burst into tears, stating she had worked her entire life for her children and did not deserve this. Rick said that, while he recognized and appreciated everything Mom had done for them, she did not have control over their life. He said she was in the wrong and that he had been ignoring or making excuses for everything she did for years, but no more. When it came to May and me, she needed to realize she had crossed a significant line and demonstrated she was not safe to be around, especially because Anna had never had an issue. Rachel explained that, as a mother, she understood Anna's reluctance to have me in the spotlight. But Anna overheard and ripped into her. So, we will definitely proceed with the lawsuit. But Rick is managing it because I have a newborn to care for and cannot be bothered with the drama. Rick said he'd handle it. None of the siblings are willing to speak with her anymore. Anna has entirely cut her off, and Emily only speaks with her when necessary. Rick and I are clearly out of touch. I don't believe my mother-in-law anticipated this. Maybe she honestly wanted to protect Anna, no matter how twisted that seems. I am not defending her in the least. But I still feel awful for her since it all went so wrong. Now, part of me wonders whether they should discuss it with her because it feels wrong and horrible to me. I do not know, maybe I'm not thinking clearly. I know if I mention this to Rick, he'll go crazy. He is irritated with her and is unable to look at her right now. I had not anticipated this, yet here we are. Update 1. Well, any reconciliation is out of the question forever. I realize I haven't updated in a while, but, well, I'm a new mother. I've been busy keeping both myself and my child alive. The good news is that May turns 8 weeks old in a few days, and we're all very excited. Anna and Jonah have been a great help to Rick and me. Emily had to return to work but still calls practically daily. May is truly the light in everyone's eyes. They adore her, and the group chat is filled with her photos. There has been no communication with my mother-in-law. I persuaded Rick not to press charges since we had too much on our plates and it would serve no purpose. Rick was reluctant, but he consented because neither of us had the energy to do anything else. When we told my mother-in-law, she seemed grateful. I say appeared, because the woman is indeed insane, and she showed everyone her true colors shortly after. Rick and I awoke about 1 a.m., a loud banging on the door. I assumed it was a heist, so I fled and hid with May as Rick attempted to open the door. I could hear shouting, but I didn't dare go outside since I didn't want May to wake up. It was my mother-in-law, and Rick said she was being insane. She continued to scream that she wanted to see May and that we couldn't keep her away. Rick claimed he had to scare her with the cops before she backed down. She was trying to force her way inside. We quickly notified Anna and Emily because if anything was wrong with her, everyone wanted to know. We were concerned, but in the end, it was for nothing. The following day, she sent us a frightening text. She began by claiming that we were being mean and horrible to her by not allowing her to see May, and that we were punishing her for doing nothing but being a mother. There was more melodramatic gibberish in there, and her text became increasingly crazy. She stated that she had the responsibility of raising 3 children and had to always choose one child's needs above another. That's what she thought she had to do for May's birthday. She did not want May to ruin Anna's day. She conveniently forgot that May was a fetus, and that Anna herself had stated several times that she had no objections to the pregnancy and wedding taking place concurrently. I still comprehended this section. What she said next startled me. She expressed concern that having May in our lives would make her less valuable to her children. When I revealed my pregnancy, she assumed Anna would be upset since that is how a normal woman would react. But when she realized how enthusiastic we were about both the pregnancy and the wedding, she wasn't pleased. She was basically indicating that she didn't enjoy how happy we were together, with and for each other. She wanted us to be jealous and competitive. She stated that when she discovered the due date was close to the wedding, she hoped Anna would be upset with us and that May would not dominate everyone's attention. But it did not happen, and everyone was just talking about May. She said she felt disrespected that a baby who hadn't even been born had stolen her position as the siblings' unifying force. She continued to type while I requested Rick to block her. I told him she was insane and dangerous to me and all of us. I've got a continual headache since I saw those messages. I can't believe a woman over 50 is competing with a 7-week-old infant. It doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't need to. Because I'm done with her. I'm done making excuses for her actions and attempting to understand her intentions. I don't care if she ends up in hell. We forwarded the messages to Anna and Emily, who are also upset. They suspect she is experiencing a manic episode. Emily stated that she will travel down to have my mother-in-law checked at a facility. I think that's a terrific idea, but I'll remain out of it. This is insane behavior, and I no longer want anything to do with her. Update 2. We have a restraining order against my mother-in-law. She did not try anything else, but we are being cautious. Emily had her tested and met with both a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Everything is okay with my mother-in-law. She was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, but that was all. The doctor stated that there was no underlying medical basis for her behavior and advised Emily to seek therapy. Emily has since made no touch. She stated she would be eager to help if something was wrong, but my mother-in-law is cruel, and she can no longer stand her. I completely understand and share your point of view. If she had a psychological problem, she may have received my sympathies and help in a few months. But once that's ruled out, we know who she is. There is no way to reconcile it. This is why we sought a restraining order. May's safety is extremely important to Rick and me, and my mother-in-law has proven herself to be dangerous twice. Furthermore, she harbors animosity for May in particular, so we must take extra precautions to keep them apart. I believe this will be my final update, and I hope I never have anything further to say about the entire episode. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. On my wedding day, I exposed my fiancé and stepmother's affair, causing my father to collapse from shock. It's an unimaginable situation, and even now I can hardly believe this is my reality. Writing this down feels like the only way to process what happened. My mother passed away when I was 16, leaving my father utterly heartbroken. For 2 years, he devoted himself entirely to raising me and my younger sister Claire. Then he met Amanda, who became his wife and our stepmother. At first, I was resistant to her presence. I felt no one could ever replace my mom. But Amanda never tried to take her place. Instead, she positioned herself as a friend, someone supportive and understanding. Over time, she earned my trust. She helped me pick out prom dresses, gave me advice about college, and was always there when I needed someone to talk to about relationships. Eventually, I considered her family. 4 years ago, I met Henry at work. He seemed perfect, successful, charming, and the type of person who could light up a room. What really stood out was how effortlessly he fit into my family. He bonded with my dad over golf, chatted with Claire about her favorite reality shows, and formed a connection with Amanda through their shared love of yoga and meditation. After 2 years of dating, Henry proposed during a family trip. It felt like a dream come true. Amanda was deeply involved in the wedding preparations, helping with everything from choosing the venue to attending my dress fittings. I thought I was incredibly lucky to have such a supportive stepmother. 2 days before the wedding, everything unraveled. My cousin Ben, one of Henry's groomsmen, asked to speak to me privately. He looked pale, almost sick, as he showed me a video he had recorded during Henry's bachelor party. In the video, Henry, visibly drunk, bragged about his affair with Amanda. He described how it started at last year's Christmas party and revealed in excruciating detail how they would meet at hotels while pretending she was attending yoga classes. What broke me was his admission that proposing to me was just a ploy to keep their affair hidden. Shocked and devastated, I didn't know what to do. But Ben encouraged me to dig deeper, so we did. We recovered deleted text messages between Henry and Amanda, uncovering hundreds of exchanges where they planned their meetings. Amanda's credit card bills showed frequent charges at hotels on days she was supposedly at yoga. I even went to the hotels they used the most. One manager recognized them and allowed me to view security footage of them checking in together multiple times. The evidence was overwhelming. It was like a nightmare. While I had been working extra hours to save for our wedding, my fiancé was betraying me with my stepmother. At first, I considered canceling the wedding quietly. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wouldn't be enough. Canceling without explanation would leave room for whispered rumors and twisted narratives, likely painting me as the irrational one. No, they needed to be exposed for who they truly were. On the day of the wedding, instead of walking down the aisle in my expensive white dress, I arrived wearing jeans and an old t-shirt. Guests were confused, whispering amongst themselves. Amanda rushed over, trying to escort me to the bridal suite, insisting we could fix whatever was wrong. Henry looked nervous but tried to act calm and collected. I took my place at the altar. When it came time for the vows, I signaled to the AV technician we had hired to handle the video screens. Instead of our carefully curated wedding video, the footage from Henry's bachelor party began playing. Every shocking, vile detail echoed through the speakers. Then came the security footage from hotels and their text message exchanges, displayed for all 200 guests to see. The room erupted into chaos. Amanda tried to escape, but my uncles blocked the exits. Henry stood frozen, stammering that he had been drunk and joking in the video. My father, overwhelmed by the betrayal, collapsed and had to be rushed to the hospital. Afterward, some guests criticized me, saying I went too far and should have handled the situation privately. But after enduring over a year of lies and humiliation, I felt they deserved every second of public exposure. If they had wanted privacy, they should have thought of that before betraying me and my family so thoroughly. Now, my father remains in the hospital under observation. The stress of everything has taken a toll on his health. Amanda hasn't returned home since that day, and Henry continues to call and text me, begging for a chance to explain himself. I've blocked his number on every platform, but he finds new ways to try to reach me. Claire, my sister, is staying with me because she doesn't want to be alone in the house, surrounded by the memories of what Amanda and Henry did. As I try to piece my life back together, I'm left grappling with the realization that every happy memory from the past few years, family dinners, vacations, holidays, feels tainted. Were those moments of laughter and connection genuine, or were they just opportunities for Amanda and Henry to sneak around behind my back? The betrayal cuts deeper than I ever imagined. For now, I'm focusing on supporting my father and Claire as we navigate this storm together. I don't know what the future holds, but one thing is certain. At least the truth is out. They can no longer hide behind the facade of family unity and love. It's a small comfort, but it's a step toward healing. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I exposed Henry and Amanda during my faux wedding, and things have only gotten worse. I assumed that playing the video would be the end of it, that they would flee in humiliation and I would be able to start rebuilding my life. Instead, it feels as if I've opened Pandora's box. Amanda has emerged, not to apologize or express regret, but to try to dominate the story. She wrote a dramatic email to our entire extended family, friends, and even some of my workplace. She portrayed herself as an innocent victim, duped by Henry. She said my father was constantly working, which he wasn't, and that she was lonely and vulnerable, which she also wasn't. According to her, Henry chased her constantly until she caved in. In her email, she mentioned that she felt stuck and couldn't tell anyone since she didn't want to break up our family. She even had the arrogance to imply that she only helped arrange the wedding because she was looking for an excuse to break up with Henry. The entire email was filled with lies and phony apologies about how she never intended to upset me. Then my cousin, who had taped the bachelor party video, decided to probe deeper. He works in IT and understands how to recover deleted emails. He discovered years of correspondence between Amanda and Henry, going back to when I was still in college, long before Henry and I met. They actually knew each other from the yoga studio where Henry used to work as an instructor. Amanda was one of his frequent students. During my final year of college, when I was stressed out, Amanda became insistent that I try yoga. She expressly recommended this studio and often praised their professors, particularly Henry. She made sure I only attended courses when Henry was instructing, claiming they were the greatest for beginners. Looking back, I recall her asking extensive questions about the classes, whether I thought Henry was a competent teacher, and even if I found him appealing. She was literally orchestrating the entire romance. The worst revelation came when my father checked on our family beach property. He discovered a wooden box concealed in the back of their wardrobe, filled with love letters between Henry and Amanda. These letters were not simply recent. They dated back years. They laid forth their plan for Henry to marry me so they could continue their connection without suspicion. They even joked that I would never notice because I was too preoccupied with my work. The wedding video has circulated throughout our neighborhood. People who weren't even at the wedding witnessed it. Henry's groomsmen began providing additional information about what he said at the bachelor party that were not captured on tape. Apparently, he made several vulgar remarks about having a mother and a daughter. Then additional women started coming forward with stories about Amanda. Two of Claire's high school friends contacted me independently. They both said Amanda attempted to seduce their elder brothers when they came over to study. One of the brothers was 19 at the time. Another member of our church confessed that Amanda had an affair with her husband 3 years ago. My stepmother appears to have a history of chasing younger men, particularly those connected to her daughters. My father was released from the hospital after 3 days, but he isn't the same person. His blood pressure remains elevated, and he rarely eats or sleeps. He spends the majority of his time in his study, looking through old photographs and family recordings. I visit him every day, but seeing him in such a way breaks my heart. He constantly apologizes to me, claiming that he should have spotted the indications. Henry finally stopped contacting me personally when I threatened him with a restraining order, but he has since propagated his own version of events. He claims I'm unstable and overreacted to innocent drunken conversation at his bachelor party. His family fully supports his lies. His mother even contacted me, saying I had ruined her son's life due to a misunderstanding. She argued that the hotel visits and messages could be explained if I only let Henry speak to me. I blocked her phone number. The ultimate blow came when Claire discovered Amanda's diary in a false bottom drawer in her craft room. What she described about her relationship with Henry made me physically ill. She described their encounters, future plans, and how they giggled about their secret at family gatherings. She even told her lover how much fun it was to help organize my wedding, selecting sites where they had already hooked up. Reading those diary notes destroyed something inside me. All the times I thanked her for her assistance with the wedding and confided in her about my connection with Henry, she was laughing behind my back. How did I miss what was going right in front of me? Update 2. It has been a month since my last report, and the situation has deteriorated in ways I never expected. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, something new emerges. The most significant development is that Henry lost his position at the investment firm. It comes out that his boss's wife attended the wedding and videotaped everything on her phone. The video spread across the office and eventually reached the company's board. They judged that Henry's actions reflected poor judgment and a lack of moral character. Because he dealt with high net worth clientele who trusted him with their money, the company concluded it couldn't take the risk of keeping him. Henry was dismissed last week without severance pay, but that's not the worst part. Amanda totally lost it. While my father was still suffering from everything, she emptied their joint accounts, taking nearly $200,000. She also grabbed all of the family jewels, including pieces that belonged to my mother and were intended to be passed down to me and Claire. My mother's engagement ring, her grandmother's pearls, and even the locket containing our infant pictures are all gone. Amanda left a dramatic statement, stating that years of mental manipulation and anguish pushed her to take drastic steps to protect herself. My father's lawyer is trying to find her, but she appears to have vanished. She even emptied her personal storage unit without anyone noticing. Claire eventually broke down and said something that made my blood boil. Last year, after her senior prom, she discovered Amanda attempting to seduce her boyfriend Tom. Claire had gone upstairs to change out of her outfit, while Tom waited in the kitchen. When she returned, she discovered Amanda cornered Tom against the fridge while wearing nothing but a silk robe. Tom appeared afraid. Amanda attempted to explain it as a misunderstanding, claiming she didn't expect anyone to be in the kitchen so late. She begged Claire not to tell anyone, fearing it would split the family. Claire, barely 18 at the time and terrified, remained silent. She broke up with Tom the next day, too embarrassed to tell him the true reason. More details concerning Henry and Amanda's affair emerge. Amanda's yoga friend contacted me, claiming Amanda and Henry's relationship at the yoga class was an open secret. Everyone assumed it was over when Henry moved to work in finance, but it appears they just became better at hiding it. The friend discovered old images from a yoga retreat of Henry and Amanda looking quite cozy, shot while Henry and I were already dating. Amanda's yoga acquaintance also noted that she had a reputation for getting too close to male pupils, particularly younger ones. The studio owner had admonished her several times to respect professional boundaries. This validates Claire's friends' claims about Amanda chasing their brothers. My father has started divorce proceedings, but he is not doing well. His blood pressure is alarmingly high, and his doctor has prescribed additional medication. He rarely leaves the house, save for sessions with his lawyer. Every fresh revelation concerning Amanda's dishonesty appears to age him an additional year. What hurts the most is that Amanda's betrayal extended far beyond the affair. She actively sought to get close to vulnerable younger males in her family. She preyed on Claire's boyfriend while he was barely out of high school, manipulating events to get her way while seeming to be a loving stepmother. I keep discovering concealed receipts from places I never knew existed, a burner phone in her garden shed, and gift cards and notes from Henry hidden in her old books. It's as if she had a secret existence that ran parallel to ours. Some of Henry's buddies have reached out to apologize. They admitted knowing about the affair but were too afraid to say anything. One of them said that Henry would boast about how easy it was to deceive me because I worked so hard. He preferred my lengthy hours since they allowed him more time with Amanda. The entire situation makes me feel unclean, as if every memory from the last 5 years, family dinners, holidays, vacations, is soiled. Were those just ways for them to sneak around behind my back? How many times did they laugh at me while professing to care about my well-being? Update 3. 6 months later, the fallout still. Amanda reappeared in Arizona, living with a 35-year-old yoga instructor she met on a retreat. She originally attempted to challenge the divorce, saying that she deserved half of everything because my father's work schedule drove her to infidelity. Her lawyer dropped the case after my father's legal team produced evidence of her numerous indiscretions and money theft. Amanda received nothing in the settlement other than her own items, including the jewels and money she had stolen. We found some of my mother's jewels in pawnshops. The proprietors were sympathetic to our story and let us buy back a few pieces at cost, but my mother's engagement ring and most of the family antiques are still gone. Amanda alleges she sold them for cash and squandered everything. Henry's life has gone apart. After losing his work, he was unable to pay for his apartment and returned to live with his parents. His attempts to find work at other investing businesses were unsuccessful, as no one wanted to hire him after what transpired. A video of his bachelor party confession went viral on LinkedIn, and it now displays when people search for his name. Amanda left him for her yoga instructor when he lost his job and money. He recently showed up intoxicated at Claire's college graduation celebration, weeping about how he gave up his life for Amanda. When he attempted to force his way into the room to speak with me, security had to forcibly remove him. Even his parents have stopped defending him and are advising him to relocate out of state for a new start. The wedding venue contacted us to refund our entire money. They even wanted to utilize our story anonymously as a cautionary tale in their new contracts, which now include provisions barring unauthorized video displays during ceremonies. My father is doing better physically. His blood pressure is under control, and he is gradually reconstructing his life. He sold the beach house, unable to endure the memory of their affair, and relocated to a smaller home closer to me and Claire. He's also unearthed writings that show how thoroughly Amanda exploited us over the years. She documented instances in which she gaslighted him, such as shifting his keys and pretending he was forgetful or lying about agreements they never made. She did the same thing to me and Claire, quietly diminishing our confidence while trying to be helpful. Claire is succeeding at college, dating again, and feels lighter since she no longer needs to worry about Amanda preying on her boyfriends. She's even reconnected with her previous boyfriend Tom, as friends, which has helped her heal from the trauma. As for me, I am not interested in dating right now. My pals continue to try to set me up, but I need time to trust again. The most difficult thing is not the betrayal directly, but recognizing that every good family memory from the last few years, family dinners, holidays, even tiny moments like watching TV together, was based on lies. I've moved to a new apartment in a different part of town, changed my phone number, and blocked Henry and Amanda across all platforms. Some people still believe I went too far with the public exposure, but I do not regret it. Sometimes the truth requires witnesses, and sometimes the only way to deal with toxic people is to shed light on their actions. To anyone experiencing a similar betrayal, believe your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. I spent years disregarding red signs because I wanted to believe in the ideal family life. Never again. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I was ignored by my family, overshadowed by my mom's favoritism. No matter how hard I tried, I was always blamed for my sister's mistakes. I was never a favorite. That was my sister, the golden child. The person who could do no wrong, no matter how vicious she was or how much she got away with. My mother adored her. And me? I was just there. An afterthought. A shadow in my own house. It's always been this way. Growing up, I immediately realized that my opinions did not matter. My dreams were unimportant. My feelings? Either disregarded or mocked. My sister failed a test because I distracted her. When she lost a buddy, I was very likely the cause. When she broke something, I must have pushed her. And my mother? She believed her. Every single time. I strived to be a perfect daughter. I worked hard. Received good grades. I remained silent as they insulted me. I never acted out. Never fought back. I hoped that if I demonstrated my worth, they would eventually love me as much as they loved her. However, nothing changed. And suddenly everything came crumbling down. It began with an argument. Well, they were arguing. I was just standing there and letting them rant. My sister had failed a class and, rather than accepting responsibility, blamed me. Again. I didn't know how. Perhaps I stressed her out simply by being. "You've ruined our lives," she exclaimed. I barely had time to respond before my mother added, "We'd be happier without you." And that was it? The moment that left me broken. I did not cry. I did not yell. I did not beg them to take it back. I just nodded. Then I turned around, walked to my room, got a backpack, and packed whatever I could fit. They did not stop me. They did not even watch me depart. Just like that. I was gone. I stepped outside into the night, the weight of my backpack pressing against my shoulders. However, nothing compared to the heaviness in my chest. I walked without a destination. Simply putting distance between myself and the house I'd never fully called home. It was frigid. I recall that vividly. The air nipped at my skin, but I didn't shudder. I was numb. I had always imagined leaving would be spectacular, like in the movies. Maybe with tears rolling down my cheeks. Maybe with one final lingering look at the house I was leaving. However, there was none of it. No one pursued me. Nobody called my name. Nobody cared that I didn't know where to go. I had no plans. There's no safety net. My savings? Laughable. I had a few $100s put away from modest tutoring gigs. But I knew one thing for sure, I'd never go back. I chose a cheap motel for the night and paid for a single room with trembling hands. I glanced at the bed but couldn't make myself lie down. Instead, I sat at the small desk, the weak yellow light flickering above me, trying to decide what to do next. I did not have a degree. I didn't have any connections. I barely had any money. But I had one advantage. I'd spent my whole life being ignored. Underestimated. Nobody had ever handed me anything. If I was going to succeed, I'd have to create something from nothing. I began with what I knew. Studying. It sounded ludicrous at the time, but I was really excellent at it. I had spent years excelling in school, instructing other students, and assisting individuals with complicated subjects. Maybe, just maybe, I can make that into something. The next day, I went to a small cafe, ordered the cheapest coffee on the menu, and utilized the free Wi-Fi to apply for every online tutoring opportunity I could find. I kept my charges low, just enough to entice folks to notice me. Initially, it was just enough to get by. I lived on quick noodles and dollar store foods. I rented a room in a shared apartment with 3 strangers who barely knew I existed. However, it was still better than where I had come from. Because every day, I awoke knowing that no one would yell at me. Nobody would blame me for their failings. Nobody would say I was wrecking their life. And it was enough. The months have passed. My tutoring opportunities grew. 1 client became 3. 3 multiplied into 10. I soon made enough money to move into a tiny studio apartment that was scarcely larger than a box. But it was mine. Despite all of this, my family never phoned. Not once. Not on my birthday. Not on holidays. Not even to see if I was alive. It hurts, as old wounds do. Deep. Silent. Lingering. But I assured myself everything was good. If they did not care, neither did I. A year into my new existence, things began to alter. I had established a reputation as an instructor specializing in college entrance tests. Students from all throughout the country reached out, begging for assistance. However, I was still trading time for money. And I knew it wasn't sustainable. That's when I had an idea. What if I combined my lessons into something bigger? Something scalable? I spent several months researching digital marketing. watching hours of free YouTube content. I read every article I could find. Then, I began designing my own online course. The ultimate SAT preparation guide. There was a risk. I spent every spare money I had on developing the course, creating a website, and running advertisements. Sales began slowly, one here and two there. Then something changed. Word of mouth spread. Students began raving about my approaches and shared them online. And, almost overnight, it burst. I awoke one morning to see that my sales had tripled. Then quadrupled. Within a few months, I was earning more than I had ever dreamed imaginable. I moved into a swanky high-rise apartment, the kind I used to fantasize about. I traveled. I met folks who genuinely respected me. Created friendships that were not based on obligation or blood. I'd done it. I'd created myself from nothing. And my family? They were nowhere to be found. Not a single message. Not a single call. They didn't care about me. Until this morning. My phone vibrated. I scarcely looked at it. Then I noticed the notifications. Mom has 6 missed calls. Sister has 8 missed calls. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. After all this time, they had made it apparent that they never wanted me. I let out a slow breath. I'd changed. I wasn't the helpless, needy girl they had kicked out of their life. I wasn't their punching bag anymore. Whatever they wanted, this was not supposed to be an apology. And I had no intention of making things easy for them. I sat there and stared at the screen. For what seemed like hours. But in actuality, it just took a few minutes. My thoughts raced. What could they want after all this time? Mom has never apologized for the way she treated me. She'd never revealed that she always picked my sister above me. And my sister? She hadn't even realized I was gone. Until now. But now, after all, they wanted me. I eventually decided to pick up. It was almost weird to hear her voice after so long. "Hello?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Sweetie, please, we need to talk." Mom's voice quivered. "Sweetie? After everything?" She hadn't called me that in years. The phony compassion wounded. "What's going on?" I inquired, not masking my disbelief. There was a prolonged pause. We've fallen on hard times," Mom explained, her voice quivering. "Your sister, she's been having trouble at school again, and with everything going on, we just don't have enough." She said with hesitation. "We need your help." I bit my lip, a strange combination of satisfaction and wrath welling up inside me. Was this why they called me now? "What kind of assistance?" I inquired, keeping my voice calm. "We need money," she said abruptly. "Your sister's tuition. It's due. And we have bills we can't pay. I know we've never been there for you, but please. We're struggling. We need you to help us. We know it's a lot to ask, but please, we've tried everything." I could hear her sniffles. Perhaps it was genuine. Perhaps it was just guilt attempting to make its way back in. "Please," she repeated. "We need you back. We need your support." The words remained in the air. My support. They had been rejecting this assistance for years. I closed my eyes for a while, attempting to calm the flood of emotions that threatened to choke me. How could they think this was acceptable? For the first time in a long time, I felt more than apathy. It was hilarious. "You're serious?" I inquired, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You really think I'll come back and help you? After everything?" There was a gap followed by my mother's anxious cry. "Please don't do this. We know we messed up, but we're your family. You can't just leave us like this." I clenched my fist. "You never cared about me when I needed you," I replied, my voice shaking with restrained rage. "You were too busy with your golden child. You let me disappear. You told me you'd be better off without me." I paused, feeling wrath well up in my chest. But I kept it in check. I was not going to let them know how deeply they had hurt me. I was not going to let them turn this around on me. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my words as cutting as glass. Another prolonged delay. Then, "Why?" My sister's voice rang out next, agitated and panicked. I know I was horrible to you. But I need your help. I messed up, okay? I didn't mean it. I've been trying to fix things, but I don't know what to do anymore." I nearly laughed. "Fix things? How can you treat years of pain?" "I don't want your apologies," I replied bitterly. "And I don't owe you my money or my help. You can figure it out, just like I did. But please, just..." My sister's voice wavered, but I shut it off. "You should have thought about this before you kicked me out of your lives. I could feel my heart race as I hung up the phone. However, the adrenaline was not solely derived from rage. It stemmed from satisfaction. Knowing they needed me gave me a sense of satisfaction. After years of silence and pretending I did not exist, they needed me. I stood up and paced the room, allowing the gravity of the situation to set in. They were not calling to apologize. They weren't calling because they had missed me. They were phoning because they wanted me to remedy their mess. And while they struggled, they recognized what they had thrown away. But that didn't matter to me. They did not deserve me anymore. I was finished. But deep down, a part of me wanted to make them beg even longer. Make them uncomfortable. The phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen. Mom, again. Her message carried the same desperate tone. Please. I know we can't undo the past, but we need you. I grinned. They had no idea what they were getting into. The phone vibrated again. The screen flashed with another message from my mother. Please, I'm begging you. We don't know where else to turn. I stared at the message, my finger hovering above the screen. Part of me wanted to dismiss it completely. Following all. Hadn't I previously answered them? But the desperation in her tone made me hesitate. For a time. Then I shook my head. Number I was not going to soften, I was not going to be the one to improve their lives again. The thing is, I'd constructed something for myself. My empire, so to speak. My achievement wasn't solely about money. It was about the ability to choose who would be a part of my life. And my family? They no longer deserved that luxury. I put the phone down. I walked to the window. I looked out at the city. From this vantage point, everything seemed far away. So little. My former life's troubles felt like they belonged to someone else. I wasn't that person anymore. I was not their burden. Nevertheless, the messages kept pouring. I took a breath. I was not going to give in. I was not going to let them influence me with their guilt. But, deep down, there was a flare of something. Perhaps it was a pity. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps something darker. But I resisted. The following morning, I awoke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. Again. A quick peek at the screen confirmed it was from my sister. This time, I paused. Should I bother reading this? But my thumb swiped across the screen before I could think about it any longer. The message came in. I know I can't change the past, but I've been trying so hard to get into college. They rejected me, and now Mom's saying that if we don't get the money for the retake, I'll never make it. Please. Please. I'm so sorry. I felt an unusual sensation. Not sympathetic, not guilty. But something made me halt. Was this genuine? Was my sister really begging me? Or was she simply doing her part? I took a deep breath, my hand trembling as I typed my response. You never cared when I needed you. Why should I care now? I pressed send. The weight that settled in my chest felt heavier than I anticipated. A part of me felt cold and detached. I had built some protective armor over the years. But there's another part of me. It wanted to believe her. But I could not. I continued to work throughout the day. But, every time I looked at my phone, there were additional notifications. Calls. Texts. Voicemails. They were unrelenting. I could feel their desperation creeping through the screen and the words. They were beginning to disintegrate under the weight of their own decisions. But what did they expect of me? They'd made their bed. They'd picked their route. Now was the time for them to face the consequences. But then, at 7 p.m., I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. A note from Mom. I need to talk to you. This isn't just about money. I know I messed up. We messed up. But I'm asking you, as a mother, to come home. I need you. We need you. Please don't leave us like this. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered above the keyboard. I briefly pondered calling her back. Perhaps I could hear her out. Maybe I can find a way to make this work. But then, I thought about what they had put me through. They treated me as if I did not matter. I was not going to forget that. I was not their savior. With a long exhale, I typed. You had your chance. I'm done. I pressed send. And something within me cracked. I knew I'd made the proper decision. At the same time, I felt a lingering ache in my chest. Because deep inside, I couldn't help wondering. What if this was their final scream for help? What if they truly were suffering? But in the end, I learned one thing. I could not repair them. They were beyond rescuing. If they wanted anything from me, it needed to be on my terms. I put my phone down and attempted to forget about them. But the following evening, while I was sitting in my living room, Going through my phone. I heard a knock on the door. A sharp and fast rap. There was a pause afterwards. I looked up, puzzled. Who might that be? I stood up and moved toward the door, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on edge. Something did not feel right. Looking through the peephole, my stomach sank. There they were. Mom. Dad. My sister. I am standing on my porch. They looked like they hadn't slept for days. Their faces were worn, drawn, and pale. But it wasn't only their appearance that made my pulse quicken. It was the fact that they had arrived here. Uninvited. I hesitated for a time, unsure what to do. Part of me wished to ignore them. Turn around and walk away, pretending I hadn't noticed them. But the wrath I had been suppressing surged up. I wasn't about to let them enter my space, not after all they had done. I opened the door just enough to see them clearly, my heart pounding in my chest. What are you doing here? I questioned, my voice low and angry. Mom stepped forward first, her eyes wide with despair. Please, just hear us out, she begged, her voice shaking. I stared at her. The same woman who said she'd be better off without me. Who had repeatedly shoved me aside. So now. She was standing on my porch, pleading for assistance. What the hell are you doing here? I asked, my voice rising. You think just because you show up at my door, I'm going to take you back? You think I'm going to forget everything you've done? Dad shuffled uneasily behind Mom but did not speak. My sister stood next to him, staring at the ground and avoiding my look. We're sorry, Mom admitted, her voice breaking. We've been trying to reach you, but we know we've messed up. It's just so hard, and we don't know what else to do. You're the only one who can help us. The only one who can help you. I felt the rage surge like a tidal wave. You didn't need me before. Why now? You had years to fix this, I retorted. Years. And you never once bothered to reach out. To make things right. Not when it mattered. And now you think you can just show up here and make everything okay? They remained silent for a minute, evidently surprised by my coolness. Mom's eyes filled with tears. But I could not force myself to care. We've been struggling, she said in a desperate whisper. We don't have money for rent. Your sister's future is slipping away. I don't know what else to do. I clenched my fist. Don't tell me you don't know what else to do, I exclaimed, my voice quivering with rage. You had choices. You made choices. And I wasn't part of them. But now that everything's falling apart, suddenly you want me? Mom took a step forward, hand outstretched. Please, just listen. I slammed the door on her face. The sound resonated throughout the home. The boom rang in my ears. And for a brief moment, I felt a rush of power. I could finally take control of this situation. But while I stood there with my hand on the door handle, something gnawed at me. Something twisted in my stomach. It wasn't a case of guilt, it was terrible. It was the knowledge that they'd come here, to me, because they had nowhere else to go. And they had shown up. Not because they wanted to improve our connection, not because they were genuinely remorseful, but they needed me, and I despised it. They did not deserve me. But rage was not the only emotion I felt. A part of me wanted to hurt them. To show them how terribly they had messed up. Make them suffer the consequences of their own conduct. And the fact that they assumed they could simply walk up on my doorstep. It got me angry more than anything else. I moved away from the door, leaving them standing on the other side. But they did not leave. I could hear them conversing outside. Mom was pleading. My sister was crying. Dad was attempting to console them. I couldn't take it anymore. The rage within me was tremendous, and I knew I'd regret not doing something. So I reopened the door. There they were. Standing there. Still waiting. Desperation was written all over their features. Mom's eyes were red from crying. My sister hung her head low in shame, and Dad? He appeared defeated. Like a man who had lost everything and had no idea how to get it back. For a moment, I simply stood there, taking in the view of them. The family that had harmed me. The family had made me feel useless. Invisible. So now, they were here. Asking for assistance. But what do I owe them? Nothing. I took a deep breath. And then, without saying anything, I took one last glance at them. No. You don't get to come here and expect forgiveness just because you're struggling now. The words came out coldly. Hard. Like a scalpel cutting through the strain. I didn't feel any regret as I stated them. They deserve to hear the truth. You had years to fix this, I said, my tone steady but forceful. Years to realize what you lost. But you didn't care then. And I'm not going to be your solution now. I noticed Mom open her mouth in protest. But I held up my hand to silence her. I built my life. My success. From the ground up. And I'm not going to let you destroy it too. You don't get to come into my life and expect everything to magically change because you've hit rock bottom. Their eyes started welling up again. But I felt nothing. There is no guilt, no regret. Just some calm satisfaction. I knew I was finally putting myself first. Go, I stated simply, my tone unyielding. Fix your own mess, I'm done. I closed the door for the final time. Weeks have passed, and I continued living my life. My business has grown, my network expanded, and I felt more energized than ever. I had become the person I had always wished to be. The person who did not have to apologize for their accomplishments. The one who had learned to let go of the negative aspects of their history. I never heard from them again. Not a message. Not a call. And you know what? It was fine. It was the tranquil peace I hadn't realized I'd been seeking. And as time passed, I came to realize something important. The ones who have wronged you, those who abandoned you, are not the people you should seek validation. You are the one who matters. You get to select what happens to your future. In the end, I had discovered one very simple truth. You can't keep giving to individuals who have never given you anything back. The door closed. For good. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. After 12 years building my father's company to $75 million, he gave it to my brother. Did they really think I'd just accept that? After 12 years of operating my father's company, I finally increased its value to $75 million. At a family supper, my father glanced at me and smiled. Your brother will take over now. My heart dropped, but I smiled back. The following morning at work, everything changed. I vividly remember my father's smile that night, his hand resting proudly on my brother's shoulder, as if he had already made up his mind before saying the words that would change everything. Your brother will take over now. I felt my stomach plummet, but years of skill kept my expression calm. I smiled back, like if his words hadn't pierced right through me, unraveling 12 years of my life's work in an instant. The dining room was alive with the clinking of glasses and the gentle hum of talks among extended relatives and close business associates. This was more than just a family dinner. It was a celebration. A minute to honor everything we had built. Everything I'd built. My father founded Harper & Company when I was a child, a small logistics company that struggled to stay alive during its early years. I grew up watching my father fight to keep things going, working late hours, forgoing family holidays, and always pursuing the next contract to make ends meet. When I was 24, fresh out of business school, he eventually let me in. Though I had to fight for the opportunity. And I had done more than simply step in. Harper & Company had grown from a struggling regional logistics concern to a nationwide powerhouse under my leadership, with operations expanded, million-dollar contracts secured, and cutting-edge technology integrated. What was once a small, virtually bankrupt company has grown into an industry leader valued at $75 million. But, at this moment, none of it mattered. My father had already made the decision. My brother Ethan would take over. Not me? A gentle wave of approval rippled over the table, with murmurs of congratulations directed toward Ethan. I watched as he lowered his gaze, pretending modesty. Though I knew better. Ethan had never completely invested in the firm. He'd spent the last decade jumping from one failed business to the next, never quite finding his feet. He was not interested in logistics. He was not interested in operations. However, he was interested in power. I'd spent 12 years proving myself, starting Harper & Company from the bottom up, making every difficult decision, late-night strategy call, and contract negotiation. Ethan hadn't done any of it. And yet here we were. Nonetheless, I swallowed my emotions. I'd learned a long time ago that exhibiting pain was considered a weakness in this household. I reached for my wine glass and steadied my hand before lifting it. Lisa? Smile. Smile. To Ethan, I replied, my voice smooth and controlled. The visitors raised their glasses, unaware of the tempest developing behind my eyes. My mother looked at me from across the table, an unreadable expression on her face. But I knew she understood. Unlike my father, Mom had always recognized the effort I put in. But she refused to interfere. She never did. Then there was my father, smiling with the same unflinching assurance, fully oblivious that his decision had put something in motion. Ethan met my eyes from across the table, a smirk barely visible on the corner of his lips. That was the moment I knew. This was not solely my father's decision. Ethan had waited for this. He had carefully positioned himself, portraying the loyal son who had finally discovered his purpose. My father, a staunch conservative, saw no problem in his rationale. The kingdom should be passed down from father to son. A daughter's efforts were always viewed as temporary, a footnote in history, no matter how hard she worked to show different. But what they didn't realize, and none of them had considered, was that I had spent the previous 12 years not only developing a company, but also consolidating my position inside it. And the next morning, they'd figure out what that meant. That night, I hardly slept. My thoughts replayed every sacrifice I'd made for Harper & Company. Late nights, missed birthdays, and relationships strained under the weight of my desire. I had given everything to this company. And now they expect me to just step aside? They'd underestimated me. By 3 a.m., I was in my home office, typing furiously on my keyboard. Each contract, every share, all executive agreements. Nobody knew how this company worked better than I did. Ethan expected a smooth transition, that by next week, his name would be on the office door, and his employment would be guaranteed. What he didn't realize was that while my father was busy making public appearances and my brother was busy pretending to understand the business, I had secured something much more valuable. Control. I entered Harper & Company headquarters at exactly 8:45 a.m., as I had done for the previous 12 years. The same walls. The same polished floors. The same hum of efficiency persisted as staff settled into their routines. But today was different. Today, I didn't walk into my office, I was walking into a battleground. The reception area was unusually quiet, the type of silence that comes before a storm. They knew. The whispers had already begun. The story of my father's declaration during dinner had circulated quickly. Employees looked at me with uncomfortable looks, avoiding direct eye contact, unsure where their loyalty should rest. I did not acknowledge them. I strolled confidently, my heels tapping on the marble flooring, my stance solid. Never show them you are disturbed. I entered my office. Shutting the door behind me, I had exactly 15 minutes until my father and Ethan arrived, expecting them to take over as CEO and heir apparent respectively. 15 minutes before their entire strategy disintegrated in front of them. I sat at my desk, inhaled deeply, and then turned on my computer. The screen displayed a list of sensitive documents and contracts that they had never considered looking at and assumed did not matter. I opened my ownership records, lingering my hands over the keyboard for a moment before clicking on the file labeled, Executive Shareholder Agreement. And then I waited. A strong knock on my door came at precisely 9 a.m. I did not bother answering. The door opened, and my father and Ethan strolled in, both exuding confidence. His, inborn. Ethan's, carefully crafted. My father walked in like a monarch surveying his realm, and Ethan, dressed in an expensive navy suit, flashed me a smug, triumphant grin. It took everything I had not to laugh. My father said, "Lisa," in his customary forceful tone, as if acknowledging me was a favor. "I assume you're aware of the transition happening today?" Transition. Interesting wording. "I'm aware," I replied easily, reclining back in my chair. I looked at Ethan, whose smirk became wider. "Good," my father said, nodding as if we all agreed. "Ethan will be stepping in as the new CEO. We'll need you to help with the handover, get him familiar with the operations before you officially move on." I raised an eyebrow. "Move on?" I repeated, faking ignorance. "Dad, I think you're mistaken about something." His face twitched with annoyance. He was used to my silent cooperation and ability to follow instructions. He was unprepared for this. "Lisa," he murmured, his voice tight, like if addressing a child. "This isn't up for debate. We've already made the decision." I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Oh, I know, Dad," I answered softly. "The thing is, you don't have the authority to make that decision." Ethan scoffs quietly and shakes his head. "Lisa, don't make this difficult. We're trying to do this the easy way." I did not respond. Instead, I went for my remote and clicked a button. The enormous screen on my office wall displayed a document that I had been examining earlier. Executive Shareholders Agreement signed on August 17, 2015. Signatories, Lisa Harper, James Harper, father, and Ethan Harper. My father's face paled somewhat. I turned to Ethan. "Do you even know what this document is?" He crossed his arms and shifted in discomfort. "A shareholders agreement?" he wondered. I nodded. "Yes. And do you know what it says?" I tapped the screen to highlight an important clause. This document was drafted when Harper & Company was restructuring. It clearly states that any transfer of executive power, such as appointing a new CEO, requires the approval of all majority shareholders. I caught my father's gaze. And I, Dad, hold 60% of the company's shares. The hush that followed was smothering. My father's expression darkened. That's impossible, Ethan whispered as he moved forward to examine the page. Actually, it's very possible, I replied calmly. You see, over the years, while you were busy failing at every startup you touched, and Dad was busy playing the role of business patriarch, I was doing something else. I leaned forwards. I was securing my place. I turned back to face my father. Remember when you needed capital for expansion in 2017? You agreed to give me an additional 15% of your shares in exchange for my investment. And in 2019, when we had that court dispute, another 10% was transferred under my name as collateral, which you never bothered to reclaim. That, plus my original 35%, gives me the controlling stake. My dad's jaw clenched. But, Ethan was in a panic. You have to be bluffing, he exclaimed. I took out a second document. This is the most recent legal filing with the state. Want to verify? Ethan took the paper and scanned it, his face losing color with every passing second. You can't do it, he muttered. Dad, tell her she can't do this? My father stayed silent. Because he knew. I had lawfully outmaneuvered him. And he couldn't do anything about it. I sighed softly and stood up. I'm not firing you, Ethan, I explained. I don't want to force you into the real job market, but you will report to me and work under my guidance. Otherwise, I motioned to the door. You're free to leave. Ethan looked at my father, his eyes begging, but for the first time in his life, my father had no response. There was no way to fix it, because it wasn't his company anymore. That was mine. The silence in my workplace felt oppressive. Ethan still held the official document in his hand, his fingers white from holding it too firmly. My father remained motionless beside him, his expression unreadable. But I knew better. He was calculating, trying to figure a way out of this. There was not one. I had spent years preparing for this moment, not because I expected treachery, but because experience had taught me never to presume loyalty in situations of authority. For the first time in my life, my father didn't recognize me. Maybe he never had. Is that it? Ethan eventually spoke, his voice tinged with resentment. Are you just taking everything? I laughed softly, without humor. Are you taking everything? I repeated, moving closer to him. Ethan, I created this company from nothing. I made every contract, expansion, and innovation a reality. While you were busy failing above, I was keeping this company running. So no, I am not taking anything. I leaned in slightly. I'm just keeping what's already mine. Ethan's face contorted in rage, but he had no response. He knew I was correct. And worse, so did my father. He had spent years believing that bloodline was more important than skill. That his son would receive what was properly mine. He'd underestimated me. And now he had to pay for his folly. My father eventually ended the hush. You're making a mistake, Lisa. His voice was calm and calculated, but I could sense the pressure underlying. Families should stick together. Do you truly want to end this relationship? I met his eyes unflinchingly. Dad, I said. You burned this bridge the moment you made your decision without me. His lips form a thin line. Business is larger than one person. We can develop a solution that benefits everyone. I cocked my head slightly, simulating interest. Oh, I agree. I let the words hang in the air before proceeding. That's why I'm offering you both a choice. I went to Ethan first. You can stay with the company, I added, keeping my voice smooth and professional. But you will not be CEO. You will serve as an advisor with limited authority. Your compensation will be generous, but you will report to me. Ethan stiffened, but I did not stop. Or, I added, you can walk away. I will acquire your shares at market value. You can take the money and start working on a new project. My dad scoffed. You're acting like you hold all the cards. I smiled. I do. My words were followed by a dense hush. I let them sit in it, let them experience what it was like to be powerless. Finally, my father breathed, shaking his head in astonishment. I never thought you'd do this, he grumbled. Not to your own family. At his comments, I felt a searing pang. Not for your own family. I wanted to tell him he was the one who did it. That he chose to cast me aside, as if I were only temporary. But I did not. In the end, it didn't matter. What was important was that I would not let them remove what I had built. Not now. Not ever. Ethan was the first to storm out. Good riddance. I knew my brother well enough to anticipate his next action. He would approach our relatives and family acquaintances, presenting himself as a victim of corporate deception. I didn't care. I was not here to win their approval. I came here to win my future. My father waited for a while longer, as if expecting me to alter my mind. When I didn't respond, he nodded slowly. "You've changed," he stated gently. I met his gaze. "No, Dad." I just finally stopped pretending. Then he departed. I breathed and returned to my chair. I should have felt victorious. I had fought for my position, and won. But as I glanced at the vacant doorway, I sensed something else. A soft, lingering aching. A part of me had always wished for my father's approval. Some small, desperate part of me believed that if I worked hard enough and proved myself repeatedly, he would eventually see me. But he never truly looked. So now he had no choice but to see me for who I truly was. Not his daughter, not his temporary replacement. The genuine boss of Harper & Company. I returned to my computer, my attention changing. I had spent 12 years creating this business. Now I'd spend the next 12 years making it untouchable. My father and brother attempted to take everything from me. But in the end, they were the ones who had lost everything. For the first time in 12 years, my workplace felt empty. There were no phone calls from my father. Ethan sent no passive-aggressive emails, just silence. But silence did not indicate serenity. It meant the struggle had started. I knew my father wouldn't leave peacefully. And Ethan? He would fight tooth and nail to restore what he believed was his birthright. I wasn't naive enough to believe this was over. It had just begun. By the next morning, I could detect an undercurrent of discomfort in the company. Employees who had greeted me with confidence last week now appeared nervous. As if they were terrified to choose a side. Several department heads avoided eye contact. I knew exactly what was going on. My father and Ethan were using the Whisper network. Old family pals, board members, senior executives. They were spreading doubts, painting myself as frigid, ruthless, disloyal. Ethan, in particular, had taken on the character of the wounded son, betrayed by his sister. I could see him now, seated in a high-end restaurant, pretending to be sorry as he told our investors how I had taken the firm from him. And what about my father? He would not need to say much at all. Just a deep sigh. A shaky head. The neatly arranged words. I only ever wanted the best for my children. It was calculated. And risky. Because, if they could turn my board members and senior executives against me, they may force me out of my own company. At the very least, make my leadership impossible. I wasn't going to let that happen. That afternoon, I scheduled an emergency executive meeting. As I entered the boardroom, I could feel the tension in the air. Half of the room averted my gaze. The other half observed me too closely, waiting for me to slip. I took a seat at the head of the table. My seat. "Let's not waste time," I added, my tone steady. I know there have been conversations. Behind closed doors, over drinks, in hushed voices. I let my gaze sweep the room, pausing on each individual just long enough to cause them to squirm uncomfortably. I'm also aware that some of you are asking if my leadership is sustainable. Several folks tensed. Nobody spoke. I tapped my fingers on the polished wooden table. Let's clear that up now. I displayed a presentation on the screen behind me. Numbers, data, facts. I transformed this company from a struggling regional business to a $75 million industry leader. Under my leadership, we've increased sales by 300% over the last 5 years and entered 6 new markets. I turned to the CFO. Paul, do we have a single financial indicator suggesting this company is in trouble under my leadership? Paul hesitated before shaking his head. In fact, projections show another 20% growth in the next quarter. I nodded. So let's be honest about what's happening here. I leaned forwards. My father and brother are not unhappy because the business is faltering. They are not upset because I am failing to lead. They are furious because they expected me to step aside and let Ethan take over. Regardless of qualification. Regardless of the outcome. The room was silent. Then I dropped the true bombshell. I also know that some of you have been contacted in the last 24 hours, offered incentives to push for my resignation. I tilted my head slightly. If anyone here would like to disclose those conversations now, this is your chance. Several folks shuffled uncomfortably. Then, after a lengthy period, one of the senior executives cleared his throat. I received a call, he said. From your father. He said he was considering making an official appeal to the board. I nodded, not surprised. And did he offer anything in return for your support? A pause. Then, a slow nod. There it is. I breathed and stood up. My father built this company, I replied. I will not dispute that. But I went further than he could have. And I will not let him manage it from the outside. I let my voice drop slightly, controlled and threatening. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. I gathered my papers and looked each executive in the eyes. If anyone here believes my father and brother deserve control, now is the time to make your move. Silence. Nobody moved. Good. I turned and went away, head held high. It wasn't just about keeping my company. This was to ensure that they never imagined they could take it from me again. That night, I made my own call. Not to any board member, not for an investor. But what about the media? By morning, the business section of every major news outlet featured the following headline. Power shift at Harper & Co. Lisa Harper outmaneuvers family in boardroom battle. I'd made my move. Now it was their turn. And I waited. My inbox burst the morning after my story went to publication. Emails. I missed calls. Messages from reporters, investors, and board members. Some were supportive. Some were cautious. However, most of them had one question in common. Is it true? I let them wait. I knew what game my father was playing. He had spent decades mastering the art of public perception. He understood that reputation was important in business. If he couldn't beat me in the boardroom, he would undercut me in public. And that was exactly what he was attempting to do. By lunchtime, the first counterattack had arrived. A press release is nicely made, precisely phrased, but full of lies. Harper & Company has always been a family-owned business. We are disappointed by recent occurrences, but we remain dedicated to sustaining the ideals that have driven this organization. Changes in leadership are unavoidable, and we expect to transition seamlessly as we move forward. It was subtle. But I knew what it was actually saying. Lisa is irresponsible. Lisa is unstable. Lisa isn't a team player. I was not surprised. I was, however, incensed. I sat in my office, watching the news as industry analysts argued over my leadership. Was Lisa Harper too aggressive in her takeover? Will her lack of cooperation hurt the company in the long run? Can she recover from this PR disaster? They spoke as if I wasn't watching. As if I hadn't already planned my next move. Because if my father and Ethan desired a public conflict, I was planning to give them one. I did not release a statement. I did not call a press conference. Instead, I placed one phone call. To an old buddy in investigative journalism. I have something for you, I explained. But you'll need to move fast. An hour later, I emailed over documents. Emails. Financial reporting. Internal records. Evidence. Harper & Company, under my father's guidance, had engaged in unethical business activities throughout time. I had spent the previous decade quietly cleaning up. The news broke within 24 hours. Behind the scenes at Harper & Company, a legacy of hidden debts and financial cover-ups. The piece was brutal. It applauded my leadership for improving the company's financial situation. It was critical of my father's mismanagement, but most importantly, it proved that I was the sole reason Harper & Company had survived. Just like that. The narrative changed. The board has stopped doubting me. The investors stopped hesitating. And what about my father? He had nowhere to hide. 2 days later, my father finally contacted me. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering. Lisa, he murmured in a tense voice. We need to talk. I slumped back in my chair. Do we? Silence. Finally, a sigh. You didn't have to do that. I gave a tiny laugh. Neither did you? This company was supposed to be a legacy, he told me. For the family. For both of you. I had a familiar pain. A small, naive part of me had once desired that, but not anymore. Dad, I spoke gently. If you wanted me to safeguard the legacy, you should have trusted me with it. Instead, you attempted to steal it from me. Another prolonged stillness. He asked, almost reluctantly. What happens now? I breathed slowly. Now, I'm going to make sure you never touch my company again. The conflict was over. My father had lost. Ethan had vanished. And I'd won. However, when I sat in my office, staring out at the metropolitan skyline, I felt no happiness. No victory. Just emptiness. I had spent the last 12 years fighting for Harper & Company, building it, safeguarding it, and making it stronger than ever. Nonetheless, the cost of that win outweighed my expectations. Because I had secured my position, I had misplaced something else along the road. My family. The next day, I came into the office as if nothing had happened. But everybody knew the truth. The whispers had ended. The doubt had dissipated. I was no longer simply Lisa Harper, CEO. I was Lisa Harper, the lady who outmaneuvered her father and brother and emerged victorious. Some people appreciated me for it. Some scared me because of it. And some were still waiting for me to fall. I let them wait. At midday, my father and I convened in the conference room for our final conversation. He seemed exhausted. Older, as if the weight of what had happened had finally fallen on his shoulders. I waited for him to speak first. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I'm retiring," he announced simply. "Effective immediately." I did not react. I had anticipated this. "I'll sell my remaining shares," he added. "I'll keep a small percentage as an investor, but I won't be involved anymore." I examined him attentively. "And Ethan?" His jaw stiffened. "He's gone," my father admits. "Took the buyout? He won't be back." A part of me knew it would end like this. Ethan had never been strong enough to face his own difficulties. When he realized he had lost, he did what he always did. Run. Still, hearing it out made something inside me ache. No regret. Not guilty. Simply the finality of it all. I nodded. Understood. My father exhaled and rubbed his temples, as if he had a headache. Then, after a long gap, he said something unexpected. "I underestimated you." It was not an apology, but it was as close as I'd ever come. And strangely, I realized I didn't need it anymore. A month later, Harper & Company looked nothing like it did previously. Who were the previous board members who supported my father and Ethan? Gone. What about the executives who had questioned my leadership? Replaced? The company had always performed well under my leadership. But now, it was absolutely mine. And with that control comes a new perspective. I introduced proposals that my father had consistently rejected. He has described modernized systems as unnecessary. He ventured into industries that he had previously avoided. Within 6 months, profits skyrocketed. Within a year, we had reached the $100 million milestone. For the first time in my life, I wasn't battling solely to prove myself. I was fighting to create something that no one could take from me again. A year later, I met my father for dinner. It was the first time we had talked since his retirement. He looked different. Quieter. He wasn't angry now. Simply accepting. "I read about the latest deal you closed," he continued as he drank. "It was a smart move." I smirked faintly. "I know." A shadow of a smile appeared on his lips. There was no longer tension between us. There is no war left to fight. Just the simple, undeniable truth. He'd tried to push me aside. And I had proven him incorrect. He lifted his glass. "To Harper & Company," he stated. This time, as I clinked my glass with his, I did not feel angry. I didn't feel resentful. Only tranquility. Because I'd already won. And I no longer needed his permission to know it. As I sit in my office now, overlooking the city where I built my empire, I reflect on the lessons this trip has taught me. That family might be your greatest adversary. Loyalty is a currency, not a promise. That power is never given. It's taken. But more importantly, sometimes, the finest method to prove your worth is to quit seeking validation and create something so powerful that they can never ignore you again. I don't have any regrets. Harper & Company are now mine. And I aim to make sure that no one forgets it. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Neglected by my family, I left. When my brother was arrested, they begged for help. I demanded an apology, then refused. Do you ever feel like you're just there? Like you exist in a space but no one sees you? That is how it has always been in my family. I wasn't the perfect child. I was not the troublemaker. Just the one in the middle. The one who performed what was required but never quite enough. It started little. Small things. My parents forgot to save me a plate for dinner. My brother took my items without asking, knowing that no one would care if I protested. They never explicitly stated that I wasn't wanted, at least not at first, but it was always there. In the way people spoke around me, my existence seemed like an afterthought. I attempted to brush it off. Families were not perfect, correct? Perhaps I was simply being sensitive. Maybe if I worked more and performed better, they'd finally see me as someone worth keeping. So I worked hard. I made certain that my grades were solid. I helped around the house. I remained out of trouble. However, it never seemed to matter. My brother? He could do whatever he wanted, talk back, skip chores, fail a class, it made no difference. My parents would make excuses for him. He's only a kid. He's going through a difficult moment. You should be more supportive of him. Every time I brought out the disparity in how we were treated, I became the problem. It was difficult. The resentment eventually bubbled over. But it's not from me. From them. It was Saturday night. I'd just come home from work. Nothing extraordinary, simply a part-time job at a neighborhood grocery store. My parents never gave me much money, so I worked on weekends to save some. My brother, on the other hand, did not need to lift a finger. He received everything he wanted. I entered the house, tired. The first thing I saw was him sitting on the couch, controller in hand, deeply immersed in his game. A half-eaten dish of food rested on the table. And my backpack is on the floor. Open. My notebooks and papers were spilled on the carpeting. What the hell, dude? I sighed and bent down to gather up my belongings. Oh yeah, he mumbled, staring at the television. We needed paper. I took some. As I flipped through my notebook, my stomach sank. My notes, which I had spent hours on, were gone. Torn out. I clenched my jaw. Are you serious? He finally looked at me and said, relax. It's simply some pointless notes. It's not like you do anything important. That landed harder than it should have. Perhaps because deep down, I knew that was how he saw me. How everyone saw me. Where are they? I inquired, my voice tight. He scoffed. Dunno. Probably in the trash. I'm not sure what happened at that moment, but something inside me snapped. Not in a violent, screaming way, but in a cold, calm knowledge. I was not one of them. Not really. I took a deep breath and forced myself to remain calm. You're unbelievable, I mumbled as I walked by him to the kitchen. That's when my folks entered. And that's when things started to go wrong. My mother and father entered, laughing at something, an inside joke between them. Something I never participated in, but as they noticed me standing there, their demeanor changed. What's with this attitude? My father asked, his eyes narrowing. I sighed sharply while still holding my destroyed notebook. Ask him, I said, nodding to my brother. He ripped out my notes. I just threw them away like they were nothing. My mother scarcely glanced at him. It's just paper, she remarked with a dismissive palm. I stared between them, expecting something. Even anything as simple as that wasn't cool or don't do that again. But nothing. Instead, my brother smirked. Yeah, it's just paper, he repeated, as if he knew he had already won. I felt my fingers tightening around the notebook. Right. Of course. I turned to head upstairs, but my father's voice stopped me. You know, this attitude is exactly why no one wants to be around you. I froze. What? I inquired, turning slowly. Dumb, my mother moaned, as if she had grown tired of me. You overreact to everything. Constantly playing the victim. Always creating problems. Is this causing problems? I gave out a sour laugh. For what? Expecting basic respect? Because I don't want my belongings trashed? My brother snorted. God, you're so dramatic. I shake my head. You behave as if I'm the problem, but you don't even notice what's occurring. You just let him do what he wants. Dad folded his arms. Because he's not the one constantly whining. That hit hard. But not as difficult as what happened later. My brother lay back on the couch, arms extended behind his head, smirking. No one wants you here, man. I felt my stomach drop. But my parents' reaction broke something in me. They nodded. They truly nodded. My mom didn't say anything. My father didn't argue. They just stood there silently. As if they had already accepted that fact. I did not yell. I did not beg them to take it back. I just breathed. And something inside of me went cold. Okay, I replied simply. And I went upstairs to pack my stuff. And I left. But this was not the end. Not even close. Because the next morning, my phone was filled with 12 missed calls. And that's when I realized that leaving was the best decision I'd ever made. I did not answer any of the calls. Not at first. I simply gazed at my phone, watching as the notifications piled up. My brother. My dad. Even my mother. For a family that didn't want me, they were frantic to contact me now. I let it ring. I was not in a haste. After leaving last night, I didn't have a plan. I threw my belongings in a duffel bag and walked out, feeling numb. I crashed at a friend's place, someone who genuinely cared about me. He didn't ask any questions. I didn't push. He simply tossed me a blanket and added, "You can stay as long as you need." It was more kindness than my own family had shown me in many years. They wanted something now. And I suspected it wasn't because they missed me. By the time the calls ceased, a few texts began to arrive. The first ones were exactly what I imagined. "Mom. You are acting immature. Come back. Dad. Enough with this crap. You should quit acting like a child." I scoffed. Yes, I actually left. They were definitely not apologetic. Then a new message arrived. One event transformed everything. "Mom. Come home now. We have an issue." I glanced at the screen, my pulse quickening. Is there a problem? I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I finally texted back. Only 2 words. "Me. What happened?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Mom. Your brother messed up. Bad." And just like that, I knew. They did not miss me. They did not want me back. They needed me. And that gave me an idea. I lay back on the couch and stared at my phone. So they needed me. Interesting. I was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, I allowed them to sweat a little. If my brother had truly messed up, whatever happened was significant enough that my parents, who had never taken my side, were now reaching out. After around 10 minutes of silence, more texts started arriving. "Dad. We don't have time for your attitude, just come home. Mom. Please. This is serious, seriously." That almost made me laugh. When my troubles became serious, they advised me to get over them. But now that my brother was in peril, it became crucial. I took my time penning the next response. "Me. It's not my problem." A minute has passed. Then another. Then my father called. I let it ring, declined. A second later, a text appeared. "Dad. You are being selfish." I breathed sharply through my nose. Selfish? That was impressive coming from him. Then my mother texted again. "Mom. Your brother has been arrested." I blinked. Okay, now I am interested. I took my friend's car keys from the countertop. "I need a ride." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Thought you were done with them." I smirked. "Oh, I am. But I need to see this for myself." 15 minutes later I pulled up in front of my home. My father was pacing on the porch, phone in hand, and appeared more anxious than I'd ever seen him. My mother sat on the steps, head in her hands. For once, no one laughed, no disparaging remarks, just pure panic. Silence. I took my time walking up. "So," I casually inquired. "Who wants to tell me what happened?" My father turned, his gaze steely. "Where the hell have you been?" I raised an eyebrow. "Not here, like you wanted?" He clenched his teeth, but before he could respond, my mother spoke. "It's your brother," she explained, her voice cracking. He stole something? From the wrong people?" I frowned. "The wrong people?" Dad ran his fingers over his face. "Some guys at that arcade he hangs out at. We don't know the details, but they called the cops. He's in holding right now." I nearly laughed. Of course, my brother had spent years treating me like garbage, believing he was untouchable. And now, the actual world had struck him like a truck. I crossed my arms. "And what do you want me to do about it?" Mom shot me a frantic look. "We need money. For a lawyer. Bail. Something. We need your help." I stared at her for a long time. Then I finally grinned. They needed me. But I didn't need them. After years of shoving me aside and treating me like I was nothing, they now looked at me as if I were their only hope. And in a way, I was. I tucked my hands in my pockets and tilted my head slightly. "So let me get this straight," I muttered. "You told me I was unwanted. You let my brother treat me like garbage. You didn't care when I walked out. But now that he's in trouble, you suddenly remember I exist?" My father's jaw stiffened. "This isn't about that. This is about family." I laughed. A brief piercing noise. "Oh, now we're family? That's funny. Because last night, I was a burden." Mom's eyes were begging. "Please. We can talk about all of that later. Right now, we need to get him out before this gets worse." I let out a slow breath, pretending to think about it. "And how much money are we talking about?" Dad exhaled. "Bail is set at $10,000. We can pay a portion, but we need you to cover the rest." I whistled. 10 grand, huh? Sounds serious. My mother perked up somewhat. So, you'll do it? I smirked. Oh, absolutely not. Their faces sank so quickly that I nearly felt awful. Almost. Excuse me? My father snapped. I shrugged. Not my problem. Mom's voice crackled. But, he's your brother. I shake my head. He's your son. I corrected with a firm voice. And you made it very clear that I was never part of this family. Dad stepped forward, wrath in his eyes. You think you're proving a point? You think this is funny? I met his stare without flinching. No. I smirked. I think it's fair. Mom grabbed my arm, her words urgent. We'll pay you back. I took a step backward. You think I trust you? The people who threw me away without a second thought? Her lips opened and closed, but she said nothing. I shake my head. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to figure this out without me, just like you always wanted. And I'm going to walk away, just like you told me to. I turned on my heels and returned to my friend's car. My father cried after me, Don't you dare walk away from us. I looked over my shoulder. You already did it first. Then I got in my car and drove away, leaving them in the mess they had created. I drove away. My fists gripped around the steering wheel. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt like I finally had the last laugh. But, instead, I felt hollow. Not because I regretted my decision, they deserved it, but because after all, even when they begged for my assistance, I knew they still didn't consider me family. They simply saw me as a solution. A wallet. A safety net. And now, that net was gone. That night, I sat in my room, reading through my phone and eating a beautiful, fatty burger from my favorite takeout restaurant. It was serene. Quiet. I hadn't experienced a night like this in years living under that roof. I considered turning my phone on mute, but I couldn't resist checking my alerts. Surprise, surprise, my family had not given up. Mom sent 3 SMS in a row. Mom. Let's work something out. Please let's speak. Mother. Your brother is still in jail. We're having trouble getting the money together. Mom. Please, I understand we were tough previously, but, we're family. I almost choked on my soda. Are we now a family? Did they finally care? That was lavish. I was pondering whether to answer when another text arrived, this time from my father. Dad. See, we can repay you. You simply need to trust us. That one had me laughing out loud. Trust them. The same people who for years treated me as if I were an unwanted guest in my own home? Are these the same people who advised me to leave without hesitation? Yeah. Right. Just as I was about to put my phone down, another message arrived. Brother. Come on, man. Are you really going to let me rot here? Oh, this was really amazing. After everything he's put me through, all the times he's shoved me around, mocked me, and labeled me useless, what now? Now he sought my assistance. I decided to have some fun. Me. You said no one wanted me around. I'm simply respecting your requests. Delivered, read. No response. I smiled at myself, extended my arms behind my head, and ate another piece of my burger. Life was good. The following morning, I awoke to a rush of messages. Groggy, I massaged my eyes, unlocked my phone, and began scrolling through them. Apparently, things were getting tough for the family at home. Dad. We had to sell both the TV and my golf clubs. Your mother is furious at me. I hope you're happy. Dad. Please. We don't know what to do now. And then, the best one yet. Brother. I swear to God, when I leave, you better hope I don't find you. That was hilarious. Was the same guy who needed my help now threatening me? I chose to respond. Me. That is some strong language for someone who requires my assistance. Try again. An hour passed before my mother swallowed her pride and sent another message. Mom. Please, we are definitely struggling. I let her sit in her desperation for a few minutes before responding. Me. I'll bail him out. On one condition. She did not hesitate. Mom. Anything? I smirked. I want a public apology. In the family group chat. A long one. I want you all to admit every horrible thing you've said to me, and I want you to thank me for helping. I knew that would hurt my father's pride. But if they needed my help so desperately, they'd have to beg for it. It did take them a bit. But eventually, a new message appeared in the family group chat. Dad. We need to discuss how we've treated you. We've made mistakes, and we now see how deeply we've wounded him. We profoundly regret our comments and behavior. He is an essential member of our family, and we appreciate his generosity in assisting us during this tough time. It was stiff, it was forced, and it was quite humiliating for them. Perfect. I gave them a simple thumbs up emoji and proceeded about my day. Did I really bail my brother out? Haha. Absolutely not. But at least I received the apologies I had always deserved. Next week, my brother called me. "Man, I can't believe you did this to me," he said over the phone, his voice heavy with rage. "I thought you were better than this." I couldn't help laughing. It was not a malicious chuckle. It's more like the giggle you get when the universe gives you precisely what you deserve. Better than what? I inquired, my voice light and even humorous. "I'm just giving you what you wanted. You told me I wasn't wanted, remember? So now you get to stay exactly where you belong." I could hear him smashing something into the jail bars in the distance. "You can't do this? You're really just leaving me here?" I paused for a moment before responding. "You know, I thought I might bail you out. I really did. But you, and the rest of the family, you've made it pretty clear that I don't matter." I paused to allow the words to sink in. So now, I get to laugh. I get to enjoy my life, knowing that I'm out here living it on my terms while you're stuck. Enjoy your stay. He did not say anything for a while. I could almost see him furious on the other end. But I didn't care. After years of being regarded as an afterthought, like an unseen shadow in the backdrop, this was my moment. When I hung up the phone, a sense of relief washed over me. I wasn't angry anymore. In fact, I couldn't feel the resentment I used to harbor for them. Everything had melted away. Just like that. My brother remained in jail. They did everything to get him out, but the charges were so serious that they couldn't help him. They begged and pleaded, but the reality was, they needed me far more than I needed them. As for me, I walked away. Hold your head high. I knew I'd finally returned my power. I didn't have to move a finger to make their lives miserable. They had already done it for me. All I had to do was relax, enjoy my quiet, and know that they would never see me the same way again. And whenever I looked at my phone, with its continual reminders of how desperate they were, I smiled. Because in the end, it wasn't only about the money, it was about the sweet, fulfilling taste of vengeance. For the first time in years, I was finally living for myself. Honestly, this story is quite satisfying. The protagonist was mistreated by his family, but the way he turned the tables and refused to help his brother was great. It's like the best revenge. And he didn't even need to do anything drastic, just let them face the consequences. What are your thoughts? Was that the correct decision, or did he go too far? Would you have helped? Or is this retribution well deserved? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.